Hey everybody, this is the third installment of our Gray Monarch series, the third and grand finale, final part. If you've been watching up to this point, you know that these episodes are full of content that a lot of people may find disturbing. The satanic ritual abuse, protocol abuse, abuse of minors, and a lot of other disturbing things go on in these episodes, not to mention some language that you may not find very savory. This is the last episode in this series. If you are starting here, I encourage you to go back to episode 1 and watch all the way through 1, 2, and 3. But thank you guys for sticking with us. This conversation has been one that's difficult to have, but also very necessary to hear about some of the things that go on in our world that don't quite make the news the way that they should. And you'll learn a lot about programs that date all the way back to a post-World War II United States, all the way up until the modern age. So thank you very much for sticking with us. Let's get to the show.
We have been tipped off to false flags that are being planned. These false flags, they're twofold. One is on the upcoming CE5 cruise of Greer. This is the first cruise ever. And then at the same time, through the Skywatcher event. What they're planning to do with that is they've been trying to summon one of these things and basically get the recording and all that, and they have it tied in with AARO. There is supposed to be a false flag there where people are damaged. There has already been an incident.
Like hurt by non-human intelligence people.
Supposedly by non-human intelligence,
okay.
But it will not be non-human intelligence. Okay. What they have is their psionic asset is hooked up to some of the domestic equipment, because this is what they do. They end up having these people interface, with these things. They're supposed to do a false flag to where people are getting damaged. I mean, this is looking to pass legislation to restrict third-party activity for this, and then possibly form a registry as well, which these people are already registered on HCS lists, but for these psionic assets like reclaimed from these programs.
Let's go!
Bro, this is the third installment of this episode, Gray. Thank you for coming back on and talking to us. This one I feel like will be the opportunity to get the message out in the most intense and digestible way. I say digestible because it'll be the most important things that you feel like we should all learn about. But obviously, as with the last couple episodes, if you've made it this far, viewer discretion is advised. But nevertheless, we persist because so does the evil in this world. So, Gray, thank you for coming back.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, man. Very interested to learn. We've talked some of the stuff that you sent me over the past couple of days, some of these conversations with folks, some of the stuff going on, psionic assets, some of the other conversations we've had about what's going on. As we said backstage, we were talking about, I want you to just paint the broadest and scariest, really, picture you can of the reality of what goes on here, from mind control, the cabal, so to speak, what they do, because I want this to have a deep impact on people's lives and understand what it is that goes on in a way that you have the unique position to be able to tell people. And to me, I know that you are the subject matter expert, if you could use that such a thing, to talk about this stuff here, and it's not me. So wherever you feel is the most important to start, I want to learn from you, and I want other people to hear this message about this evil octopus, really, that has its tentacles and everything, and what it all means, and from the spiritual side to it, the political side to it, the control, NHI, non-human intelligence, UAP side of it, some of these people that are being used, and these are names that people will recognize, all of this stuff. You really have the best vantage point to know where to dive in and begin this episode. So, like I said before, the floor is yours, brother. Thank you for coming back on and talking to us.
No, I appreciate you. So, I guess we'll just dive right in. Who's doing what? Who, what, where, when, why, right? The octopus. Okay. I had lightly mentioned we have the Dragon Societies, and then we have the Jesuits. That's pretty much what you're getting down to. And you're talking about powers that have been around so long they transcend nations, okay? When these people, as far back as documented, indisputable history goes, we're going back to far before the U.S., far before the Middle East was even anything there was going by the same name. We're talking about way back. These people have been around. If you don't think they were setting up infrastructure and establishing businesses and groups as soon as America was created, then you're mistaken. That's just, it is what it is. So we're talking about powers that have been in power. And, that's why we talk about bloodlines that can sound like fantastical to some people. But I mean, okay, you get to some of this old money and some of these old families, and they keep a very strict genealogy history and, take family dynasty very serious. And, if you're one of these bloodlines, for example, not my bloodline, but a bloodline family that I was intertwined with, the Russell family. And, if you go into one of these, bloodlines of the Illuminati, what you will think of that. There's a very thorough documented history of certain families in there. You can find out about the Russells there. The Russell family also started Jehovah's Witnesses, which I was a part of, and so on and so forth. And you have different families kind of prioritizing in different industries, right? And then, obviously taking advantage of the different industries, infrastructure and cover and whatever else, funding, whatever they can interweave and overlap. If they can vertically integrate their own sinister actions and their own, clandestine, actions layered in on top of their other activities, it's a win-win, right? So you have these families, and you have obviously the dragon societies, like I said, like China, a lot in Russia, Eastern Europe, I mean, all over the world still intertwined. And, it even goes into some of these martial arts that were brought over and even go into the motorcycle clubs. A lot of them will be affiliated with the dragon societies, and, it goes into military intelligence, so on and so forth. And then you have the Jesuits, the Catholic, you got Malta, right? The Sovereign Military Order of Malta. And, again, we're talking about power that transcends. So you have the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. Like, we could go into all these different Jesuit branches and everything like that, but we're just kind of going to go with SMOM, with Malta right here, because it's a heavy influence in the U.S. and it's kind of easier to stick and explain to that. So we're just really going to head off on Malta. I'm going to mention a few other things like Royal Order of Jesters, who, I had involvement with, and, some other things. But we're going to focus on the Malta to represent a lot and kind of going off into the offshoots, because they really are well-rounded. There's a few different ones other than just Malta, but it's all falling under the Jesuits, right? So I had mentioned before, you have, the believers and the non-believers, whatever. You have the family and the network, the family cults, right? And the family cults, the believers that actually worship things and have age-old practices, right? The family, for all intents and purposes, are the believers, right? And then you have the network, which includes the people from families that really are disillusioned with some of that aspect of it, right? And those people tend to focus more on the technology side, right? So they're in favor of technology versus the family. If they can, they will always try to do things without apparatus. Like, they could live off the land if everything went to shit tomorrow, right? But then you have like the technocrats, right? You might be able to do it faster, more precise, and immediately. But technology can get interrupted a little bit more in different ways and stuff like that. But it's important to understand that not only do you have your dragon societies and then your Jesuits, but you also have, within all those groups, you have ideology of some people that are kind of believers that, favor the dark occult methods. And then you have some people that kind of are against that, and they like more cleansly appearance and, obviously, keep it clean and go for the technology, okay? So, a lot of times you can basically say you have the white hats and the black hats, if you will. And the white hats are still going for the technology, and the black hats, are willing to get their hands really dirty, right? But at the same time, the thing is that both sides of all these families actually serve the same powers that be, whether they want to or not. It doesn't matter if you mean to, if the byproduct of your actions assists something else, even by definition, you could be worshiping. It's just, it's just one of those things. So we will get into this, but through Malta alone, it goes back, Oliver North was a confirmed Knight of Malta. Okay. So, that you have Oliver North tied in deep with the Iran-Contra smuggling. And they were using that to run psyops and fund not only Nicaraguans, but a whole lot more than that. So that's on record, okay? the Malta spreads much farther and wider. It's heavily from Wild Bill going to John Singlob and, the whole crew leading up to that groomed Flynn and also handed him off the family's first foundation, okay? Because we're going to explain this whole thing. Now, Flynn was in tight with Stanley McChrystal and also kind of closely overseeing them that Stanley McChrystal got most of the credit for, but really one of the orchestrators in this was Cheney, okay? And these people are a part of Opus Dei as well, but I'm just going to stick to Malta for an all-inclusive. We'll just call it Malta, okay? It's all close enough. And
one umbrella.
They're interweaving, So anyways, you have these people that going back with Oliver North and, that whole National Security Council, kind of Malta Council that was under that influence under the Bush dynasty and all this as well, including Cheney. They had really set up these FEMA regions with continuity of government and really farmed everything out very intelligently, okay? And this infamously included the Rex 84 Bravo drills, which was essentially rounding up citizens that were on dissident lists or likely lists, to resist, so on and so forth. And this was tied in with continuity of government to where there was 12 times more funding for covert operations than there was disaster relief through FEMA. So they had been setting this up. Now, at the same time, they were also using that smuggling network through the Iran-Contra, this same group that was setting this up, to start trafficking throughout the U.S. And are they trafficking them? Are they trafficking the drugs themselves? No, obviously they're farming that out to, motorcycle clubs, to cartels, to street gangs. Cartel, the direct activity across the border, even that was done through proxies more back then. Now it's getting a little bit more bit more straight, but street gangs, cartels, all these third parties that were also, some of these would be putting kids through this grooming, because tied into all of this is kids getting groomed to eventually become mind-controlled assets. If you've been listening this long, what this is about is turning people into Manchurian candidates, behavioral modification on a wide scale, and mixed in with this dirty underbelly, the black op power, essentially being sleeper assets that are handled, under the clandestine services, and so on and so forth. So, obviously with the drug trafficking, you're farming this activity out, so basically Malta's got their guys in key positions, right? They're using their guys basically to take advantage of national security and intertwine operations with that. It's using the cover for legal protection and obviously from the public eye, also able to divert some funds to that. What they couldn't divert, then they start their own network, or boost their own network that was going. And it's not just drug trafficking. Obviously interweaved with all this is the human trafficking, okay? A lot of these people, because you can't just get like anybody stupid when these people are throwing these parties per se. You hear about this, and Epstein, and Diddy, and you hear about all these parties coming, right? Like you don't just have like some random Joe Blow coming by, like, okay, I'm dropping off the ladies, I'm bringing it back. Like he's going to talk too much, don't get me wrong. You have procurers that go through and get this and really like find these people, right? But even that isn't good enough for these people because it's all about layered action. So, a lot of what goes on here, you have these organizations and they identify the people. First of all, how can you justify this to yourself? Second of all, what's conducive to the situation and what just makes sense? Because, these people are intelligent and it's about continuing to do this, okay? So, one, kids, the younger the better. And unfortunately, this is what's sick. Not only pedophiles do, but if you have someone that's trying to train someone, the younger the better, okay? A broken home so you can get faux loyalty and that so no one's looking for them, even better, okay? These aren't things that don't make sense. These are things that do make sense, okay? So, they're looking for troubled youth. They're looking for people without fathers. They're looking for people that mothers are out there that their parents are already criminals, okay? They're looking for something like that, okay? And that's who ends up getting into the human trafficking ring. So that's a huge trade, and look no further than the actual fucking numbers that we put out on that, regardless if there's some, lying or whatever, or cover-ups going on, like,
right.
Even our numbers show this is a massive thing, okay? So, we'll be bouncing back and forth here, but on the ground level of activity, at the very, very, very dirtiest level, base level, where are these kids coming from? Some of these kids that get caught up in this, are just born into it to where their families are already involved with cartels, already involved with military intelligence, and they're just, basically go send their kids wherever they go for the day, something like this. Like, the military intelligence kids aren't necessarily an easy target. So let me pull that back. But sticking more to the kids on the streets, I guess, if you have these people and their parents are in gangs, cartels, they're pretty easy prey. If they're coming from broken homes, a lot of them are going into the foster system, linked up all around these foster issues. And it's well known that there's huge abuse epidemics. That's deliberately enabled because what they're doing is identifying kids with the dissociation. Okay, this is all about abused kids and a massive situation being enabled. So just like they have their guy Oliver North, who was and they have other people in the network making sure that they can bring in the drugs to traffic and enabling that situation as a means to an end to then use that sub network and for funding. Okay, they have guys in different places as well that are enabling a child abuse epidemic. Okay, with poor policies that could obviously be changed. Just simple. There could be changes, no nonsense changes done to the system to make this work. It's not that things can't be done. It's that the system's disgusting, and there's many ways that it's able to be taken advantage of. I mean, perpetrators are able to get children in cases. It's really bad if you actually look into it. I'm not even going to start quoting things because I'm not the foremost expert on that. But if you look into CPS and DCS, and there's not just that there's all bad people there. A lot of it is just the policy and the way things happen. There's a lot of bad in this world, and unfortunately, it is what it is. So essentially, these kids, they end up getting picked up somewhere, or they're already in it, and somewhere they're getting base conditioning. Base conditioning is the first level of abuse, okay? And it's essentially what makes sure that the child's brain pattern and everything is interrupted and their brain does not integrate. It stays disintegrated into compartments, okay? Basically, once they have someone like that, it's, I guess, I get a little choked up talking about this, but I mean, so here's the thing: is because they're allowing these fucking kids to get preyed on, and it's so disgusting. But to say the direct stuff, I mean, let me explain it like this: are y'all familiar with the spirals, with the spiral symbology, and you see all the pedophile codes of the spiral?
Yeah, there's almost like a triangle-looking spiral one I've seen before on X and stuff.
Yes. So what this is indicative of is something called spin programming. Okay, there are elements of people that literally have passed around this knowledge, because this is what it's getting to, is that packeted knowledge has been spread to these third parties through organizations like Malta, who have been keeping these occult secrets, and one of them is spin programming. So what they basically do is, for no mark, no torture, they can even spin a child. And this is the sort of things that pedophiles know about. And essentially, instead of beating a child into where it would be obviously caught, right? It's the type of thing to where once they just have a child from an abusive situation, they can literally get them and spin them in a traumatic situation and drug them and even get their mind to split. And certain foster parents literally are taught these techniques and are churning these kids out on an industrial level, okay? And this was set up, again, by such as Malta and the Dragon Societies and so on and so forth, because the whole goal here that I'm getting to is that they've been churning this out on an industrial level in order to make an army of sleeper assets, okay? That's really what this gets down to, is that they have brainwashed children in mass, and the best and the brightest obviously get passed up and eventually tried to get pulled directly into these cults. But otherwise, they get used essentially as a black op force, okay? And there's all sorts of models. Okay, and I'm skipping around here, but we'll get back to it
You're
and
good.
bring it up. The 1995 ACHRE, right, is where a therapist brought forward information and testimony from approximately 40 other therapists that had several patients. And this was blindly corroborating information, speaking about basically the brainwashing methods, the people in the government that developed this in MKUltra, and essentially just the testimony of them going through their life, and then eventually even them trying to get rid of them whenever they were failed to be programmed, and so on and so forth. Two models were explained here, okay? One was a spy assassin, which is basically a delta model, because a lot of this is known to go by Greek lettering. And then the other one was like a honeypot sex slave, a beta. So there's several models here, and we're going to explain where the different models go in life and how that works. But bouncing back here, you say you have some of these foster kids, and they were put through the spin programming that they were taught from, right? And as of now, it's only the foster father, and then say they go out and get into it. Maybe they get involved with some gang, whatever. They're going through life, and they're obviously, this is the type of people that get scooped up by someone who procures, right? And say then would go to a Diddy party. Someone would go to an Epstein party, right? It will have the procurers might be people that are in alliance within street gangs, cartels. It might be other things. It might be motorcycle clubs. And nothing against motorcycle clubs. Like, let me get this straight.
Yeah, no.
We just have sick people that are in anywhere. And unfortunately, there are certain people that do bad things and are part of this shit network, okay? So what's happening is, say, you have this random girl. I don't even want to give names to this because it's so horrible. But
of course,
they went through a foster home that was aware of this technique and had been going through the spin programming technique. They eventually get picked up. They're involved with, say, a motorcycle club. The foster parents and the motorcycle club, they might have some backdoor deal too, because a lot of these people are believers in with the cult, right? They might not, because it's in with the network. It may or may not. Some of these people gather, and there's a lot of like codes and tells, and people just get to know each other in these networks, because they might all be drug users. They might all be this. They might be that. But whatever. When you're into sick stuff, they get into sick stuff. But so anyways, this person will already have base programming, and eventually this is the type of person that's brought over to one of these Epstein parties, right? Say the Epstein parties.
Yeah.
And they might even be very young when they get there as well, okay? It's not that they're they could be much younger, because that happens too, but anywhere going up to underage, right around there, right? There's no telling. There's a wide vary. So there's several things that go on. One of the things is, they're always fielding for people to see, hey, is this the type of person that can work for me? They're always going to be looking for the cream of the crop people to do whatever, okay? At the same time, these people that if you had went through the base programming, say, of spin programming, and now this girl is going to the Epstein party and she meets someone there. So these people also, like, when you're programmed, they may be wearing an identifier. They might not realize that they're wearing an identifier, but because they've been so subconsciously reinforced, they might have certain earrings that they aren't even aware is a flag, right?
Yeah.
Or the people that brought them might tell the people. There's many different ways that this can go down, but either way, they're either directly identified or the other people, and they will know they're an asset. The type of people that are involved with this know essentially the system. And a lot of what's going on isn't just sick people getting their rocks off at these parties, right? It's not just politicians that want to get their rocks off. It's not just all about perverted pleasure. What a lot of this is trauma bonding to an asset, okay? So if you already have a base programmed asset and they come around, basically you can test them with subtle things to see if you can elicit certain reactions, right? And it gets so deep because these people have certain stimuli, and there's like a whole pedophilia code to where they use colors and shapes before they're verbal, okay? And then there's got spin program, you got a whole thing, and we're gonna get into some sick stuff here, and and I'm not trying to go through every single thing, so just going through it. either way, they'll give them tests and tells, and they field these people and then basically trauma bond to them as if they're coming up into the pipeline. And they're trauma bonding with them young and really doing that. And they might be giving them certain stimuli. They might be saying the same phrase. They might have been wearing a certain color or took them to a specific room. But what's going on is it's part of the brainwashing machine. And sometimes people are gifted there. Sometimes people are bought there. Sometimes people are inserted there hoping that someone stupid wants to deal with them, and they're actually already been programmed as basically a double agent, right? To where they'll be, again, it's like a honeypot thing like that. So you see what I'm saying? So just depending on the level of the people that are involved, you have all sorts of things going on. These people are just, there's a huge pool of children getting abused and getting these low-level brainwashing techniques, and then as it comes up the ladder, like the good ones end up getting passed up. Like, you Diddy parties one level, Epstein parties probably even going to be higher. You see up and up, and you got more VIP. So there's so much going on because everybody's backstabbing and just doing whatever the fuck. You might have, someone that's, again, being inserted there as a spy, or you might have someone that's being handed off as an asset. But either way, what's going on isn't just people getting their rocks off. This is a whole huge asset churning out factory. And again, some people are becoming a handler and will activate them later in life, whatever. The thing is about these parties, it's like, one thing, like even where I used to go, but a lot of people go to handle business in this espionage world, is the strip club, right? Because there's so much like crime, and if you're going to go there and watch something, like it's just, and people always go there because anybody can be a pervert, right? That type of thing.
People are kind of minding their own business in those places.
Exactly. And you mind your own business. But like anybody could go there, and like also you're usually not the one that's up to the worst shit when you're there, right? So it's kind of
Big
like,
facts.
It's just, and also like that's a bridge to the underworld. You just get people there, and like you might be able, if you're going and trying to find someone, like you might be able to eye out who's like an extra baller. You might be able to eye out who's fucking, really into some sick shit. He might be asking the girls about something like, oh, hey, he was asking about this. Do you want to fuck with him? You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's just feeling out. It's the same thing with these parties. It's just, anything goes. But the whole thing here is that the dirty secret of this whole world that has not came out in the news and is like the just catastrophe of the world is that some of these people are programmed people. They are mind-controlled assets, okay? And this knowledge after MKUltra blew in 77, which MKUltra was ran not only by the people who came through Paperclip, but also by people hooked up with Malta. We're talking about OSS, Wild Bill, CIA, this whole group of people, all was tied in. And, we could go through names if you want, but if you look into it, you will find them. It's for sure. That's what's going on with this, unfortunately. But yeah, so I mean, that's really what's going on here. Is it's just a whole world of these unfortunate assets, and there's a heavy overlap with this where some people are believers and some people aren't, because there are certain techniques that are more clinical and more technical, and certain technology you can use once it gets up to the higher level, because they might just be thrown away when they're young if it's not going good, and they might be used and expendable. If they keep on going up the ladder, there's other areas, other sectors, whether you get funneled through GATE, as a teenager, and then go into AP, and then get routed into some STEM thing and into DARPA, right? And you're a scientist, you might get hooked up to a brainwashing machine, but if you go maybe to another direction, you might get into some darker occult stuff, right? You might go just solely into, cartels and, some dark occult practices, Santa Muerte. And you have, you have this activity too, like with the cartels specifically, like there's a bunch of verified ritual abuse. It's a huge thing. It's a culture. And a lot of these people are verified worshipers. So you can look into this, and there's documented info about cartels and, devil worship or whatever you want to call it. There's different occult practices.
Well, you look at some of the tattoos that cartel members have too. They're very dark. A lot of them are very satanic looking, very big emphasis on death in general, skulls, things like that, other different iconographies you see on these guys. Yeah, I mean, like it makes a lot of sense to say that there's that element is present there. It's obvious.
Yeah. So, I mean, and like, for example, like I believe Folk and definitely Vice Lord was started in Chicago. And that was started at a juvenile correctional facility that had a behavioral modification program that the people were in that started it, right? This linked up with MKUltra. So this is another thing. So MKUltra, right, took these dark occult practices. And if you notice too, like you have the same symbology, like you might have red and blue, you might have, 6-point star, 5-point star, you have the same pyramid, you have the same tiered knowledge, you have the same people that are exploiting the bottom ones, right, and just cycling, right? And then eventually you climb up and it's not many people do it. But so they started these proxies, right, that are self-replicating machines, because the unfortunate thing about it is that these people aren't just like saying, hey, this is the mind control formula that we completed. No, that sort of thing is only at the very top. But the people at the very top do have deals and know they're being handled and allowed to operate. And there's rules. They have to serve up their own people. Like, business is business when you're getting up there. Like, people talk. But these were self-replicating because it's also just like these abused people abuse, right? It's just hurt people. So like, say, these people are raised in their whole family's cartel or gangs, right? Okay, so they grow up around the symbology. They grow up, it's probably a lot more fighting. If their people are around, there's a high chance of their people going to prison and being away, which leaves them more disadvantaged and then easier to get into the same thing. And like, it's a self-replicating machine by accident, right? So those sort of things are set up. And then again, they have different people, and now it's tied up, wherever they go, somewhere up there, you keep on going. Are they going to have some contacts in the government? Are they going to be handled by someone directly from Malta? Is it going to be a dual agent for that? Whatever it is. But so you have these people that are handling through the clandestine services. Usually this is all managed under the human, but and then it's just self-replicating machines. So they get some of this, and so whether they were basically raised up and going through as an enforcer for the cartel, or whether they were raised as a honeypot for Epstein party, the thing is that, these people go through a series of trials, rituals, and things that cause disassociation and get these compartments programmed. And the programming, it's very specific and precise, especially once it gets up to the high level to where they bring in some of this like very technical terms. But the base stuff just needs to be really repetition, and really associated. Like if there's always a color and always a symbology with this specific trauma, eventually you see that, and like it's like Pavlov, the dog's mouth water when it hears the bell. It's just stuff that kicks in. It's just just constant reinforcement. So you have these machines in a lot of different places across all walks of life. When you get up to the level like of the upper class people, a lot of this, like they send their kids to the same institutions, okay, and they might not have as many chances to really like get out and basically like get into some shit in the street for lesser. I mean, not that some don't, but these people, and that's why it's important to realize is these people that are really up there, a lot of them are believers, and a lot of those people that are like high up there, like they tend to be more into the worshiping, which is another aspect of this, right? And this is really where it gets there. It's like people ask like, hey, so how can these people never remember this? How can they do this? How can they do this? Let me give an example of like whether it's a foster parent that's threatening to break bones in a kid's body if he ever tells anybody about them, and also tells them that he knows like the oversight and he'll know if he reports them, or is making significant threats that they believe can happen, and they see the other kids getting abused and like, they don't know what to do. Like that really might set in, I don't know if you've ever like pinched your finger in a door, in like a car door or something. Oh, yeah. And then, so the next couple times you go to open that door, you're like, whoa, let me go slow, let me close it with my hip, whatever like that. Well, you get to certain actions and it really sticks, okay? But then when you get to this occult stuff, because people, I guess, don't understand some of this. And, I mean, what it is it's some of these occult pathworking, some of these rituals, one, it's like, these people, first of all, stair step. But like, if you bring a kid to this ritual and you have drugged them with some stuff, right? And essentially, like, they're already like tripping, just seeing stuff, whatever. And you're giving them the most serious, gruesome message. And then you inflict a mass amount of pain with all this imagery and everything like that. Like, I'm sorry to be like, you don't want to do this, but if you just think to yourself for a second how bad you could scare a kid. Imagine if you took a random kid and pretended to do a ritual to Satan or whoever you want to do. Do you understand how bad you could traumatize that kid? And people are
and
doing
it's not
this
even real.
and telling them specifically, if you ever tell anybody, like this spirit, they're like tripping, like, who knows what they show them. It could be whatever. And, tell them that they're going to kill them if they talk. Tell them that they're going to skin them alive. Tell them that they're going to get their family. Do something in front of them to something and set that example. Like, people have to understand that only needs to happen once. And that would affect that person so bad for the rest of their life from one single event. Okay? People don't, like, understand, like, how this can happen or something like that. Like, there's people that are so psychopathic and, they went through traumas in their own life and it eventually got there. But this is the sort of thing that just one little event can happen, okay? And people just need to think to themselves and understand the basis. And it's hard for me to talk about this because I get upset, but it's just so disgusting what these fuckers do. And, you hear a lot of people say, oh, the evidence. If you start looking, you're going to see enough that, that clearly this is a real thing. There's fucking criminal statutes for ritual abuse. And I believe I've mentioned in one of these talks that if you look up, there's 4 criminal statutes for ritual abuse or ritual abuse of a child. And all 4 of those actually have exemptions for government research projects.
Yeah.
So, I know this is a lot, but, it's some sick shit. Side note, there's one getting passed in Utah right now that doesn't have any exemptions. So, and that's good. And I believe that has to do with the Hamblin case and all that. So, people can check that out because there's some whole ritual abuse stuff carrying out right now.
You said the Hamblin case?
Yeah, I believe it's David Hamblin case. But if you look at Utah ritual abuse, and guess what? Was like law enforcement and stuff hooked up with it. Yeah, I mean, this stuff happens, and it's well covered up. Yeah, it's well covered up. But so anyways, so what's going on is you have people that even before the U.S. was around have been known to take part in like ritualistic ceremonies and things like this. Like if you go back to some of these age-old orders, like this is no secret. This is how things go back historically. America's new and y'all's cushy's life is new. Okay, like that's not what exists everywhere in the world, and some people still practice this as a religion. That's the thing. And you can say, oh well, they're Catholic. I assure you, and this might be a hard pill to swallow, but whether you get to Scientology, whether you get to Jehovah's Witness, okay, you want to get to Mormon, okay, if you want to go to Catholic, there is people at the very top of these that are what's called Luciferian, okay? And they're actually worshiping a system of deities. Do they worship Lucifer himself? Do they worship, Baal, right? Baal, right? Do they worship whatever the fuck they think gives them power and makes them feel good or gives the impression to other people, right? Who knows? Do they, sacrifice stuff to Santa Muerte? It doesn't matter, right? And there is, though, different methodologies and different belief systems, whether it be OTO, which has some people doing some bad things in it. Big surprise. O9A, right? 09A is known for some of their violent stuff. And there's been recent arrests in the past few years, I believe, even tied with a military officer, I believe, here in U.S. So anyways, basically, you have Malta really started a lot of this with some of these other occultic groups that were just, the dragon societies came through the SS and through the Nazi scientists and the Nazi soldiers who brought the MKUltra through paperclip, but it was also feeding through the Jesuit side as well, okay, which because you had the Jesuit people, forming the OSS and the CIA and all that. So, they created MKUltra and got all the different occult recipes and the technological recipes, drugs, everything, all the methodology, and then they started a bunch of proxies, okay? They started a bunch of proxies and fed it into motorcycle games to self-replicate and to let them basically, get paid to traffic humans, drugs, weapons in and out, to supply their black networks, doing the same thing with gangs, doing the same things with cartels, also having those same groups training, at least passively. They don't even have to know the whole recipe for mind control, but they're making sure that these kids are in an abusive environment passively. Okay, these foster networks, these people might not know. Like, they might not be like, oh, the government actually gave us this information to do this part for them. Hell no, they pass the information around to pedophile networks just enough for spin programming, so the pedophiles can fucking spin children around without damaging them and start making their little sex slave. And guess what? That aspect makes the sex slaves. Well, guess what? From the cartel, basically makes some of the people that are better soldiers. Big surprise, right? You have different types of factories to different types of proxies, and it's self-replicating machines that are layered off plausible deniability, right? And then you obviously have people handling them, and that's where it gets branched to where they have some people on these deep black, human, that's clandestine services, and that's why that area is so infiltrated by the globalists and tied up with all these orders, because that's really where the power is. Okay, so we're getting here to where you have all these kids that are getting raised up to different places, and then eventually some of them are sex slaving all the way up. And, I can't even believe I'm fucking talking like this, but it is what it is. Some people turn into enforcers, some people turn into this. But some of these kids actually get routed into actual government because, a lot of the times they keep this in tighter circles. It's a lot less likely for like someone even from the cartel side or someone from the street gang side to go up into actual service. But it happens. People definitely do. But, a lot of these people that are connected to these globalist orders are part of families that kind of already are inserted in military intelligence, and it's a self-replicating machine. They get them good jobs, they bring their kids to the same institutions, and it's kind of like compartmentalize and go. There's not so much crossover, but assets cross over to different areas, But either way, they selectively and strategically have handed off key amounts of information. Basically, they keep the real power and the real codes, but then they will train the next tier down, sometimes passively, so it's not directly connected, but just to do enough to be a machine to do the job they need for that tier, right? So they basically, plausible deniability, set it up so the other people are doing the work that they can feed up, and control, right? So, the real problem here is that you have the lower class where this is happening through foster homes in mass, which are mostly enabled pedophiles that are doing this. And the spin program symbology and all that, you will see it. They use that because it passively reinforces. That's how they identify. If you get to know that code, you will see how rampant it is. And it's not just that, there's more to it, And then, so you have the kind of the lower class that is going through a lot of the foster care, and then some of these people get scooped up in public schools to the GATE programs and all that. That essentially is also the people running the GATE programs.
I was just about to ask you about the GATE programs. I've heard that the GATE programs are used, the gifted and talented programs are used as kind of a way to find some of these kids that would be programmable or exploitable in those particularities.
Exactly. Okay, so here's the deal is, you have the youngest kids that are going in that, and, you get even, kind of poor to middle class where it's not going to private schools yet. You have everybody going through these, okay? Now, there's standardized tests. This happens, some of this is happening at daycares too and stuff, but there's standardized tests. Like, for example, the Wechsler tests, right? And if you go into the history of the Wechsler and the people that made them at Bellevue and all that, like, it gets bad. You dig into any of these people that started this stuff, you'll see really quick where they come from and what's going on. But, even with the daycare, some of them to get funding will have to do these tests. Then once you get into school, there's more standardized tests, and eventually, you got like PAS, right? If you want to go directly to it, but you see all the different parts of these standardized testing. They're actually like also testing for certain aspects. It's not just intelligence. Like, there's different types of intelligence, and through the testing system, they know basically more or less if a kid has been through this stuff. Like, they're able to passively test this. Now, when it goes to GATE, it's not just GATE. It's, the regional equivalent. I mean, they have a lot of, like, sub ones, that are different names, but just whatever it is. Gifted and Talented Education Act, right? That was enabled by the National Defense Education Act, okay? And that's essentially gets all the funding. What really selects these kids is Project Talent. and subsidiaries. Okay. So talent is a nationwide thing. This is all made by, military psychologists that used to select combat fighter pilots, right? So they industrialized this coming off MKUltra. This was directly a part of MKUltra. Jacob Javits was one of the high up people in MKUltra, and the only Gifted and Talented Actual Education Act is Jacob Javits' Gifted and Talented Education Act. So you got the MKUltra guy that's doing that provides the funding, and that's the one that's most is I think covered in over 37 states. But there's something in every state. So, anyways, that's getting kids, and the people that are involved with this at that level, they don't know what they're doing. But there's certain tests that they give kids, and essentially, they start charting that information, okay, in Gifted and Talented. And they are getting these kids' hopes, dreams, desires, the whole workup. They're also basically testing for like Freudian slips and seeing what's coming through. And this stuff is like a huge program to where like it's actively monitored, and these children are routed somewhere, if once they get identified, whether they need to be identified for help in going through there. Like it's the very small key places where they have these people concentrated. And one of these main concentrations is for trauma therapies, okay? Trauma therapies has the highest amount of, like, these people in it, which is, I know, which is messed up. Not everybody's bad in trauma therapy, but unfortunately, you have to be careful. That's where the knowledge is, but, like, that's also where they try to have some of their people. But anyway, so, GATE is getting the lower to middle class people. And essentially, it is a nationwide thing to where if they find someone that had that base programming right, they end up identifying them through several means. There's a lot of psionic testing in there too, right? But the thing about the psionic testing is, someone that succeeds in that is about 1 out of 10,000. There are psionic assets and there are people with gifts. It's extremely rare to be like able to use at the operational level. But the testing that they're doing for this psionic stuff that's mixed in with some of this GATE, because you hear people talk about this. They had the headphones. They had, they had the pink drink. They had all this. They have fuzzy memory, right? So there's one of two things. Either they didn't have some history and they just ran through this, or they did have history. And if they have history, what else is going to happen is the person's going to have missing time. Not every people that had missing time, but most of these people you hear, and I've been doing this for over 10 years to where I've been talking to people from GATE, because I would whistleblower on GATE literally over 10 years ago. You see a lot of these people have missing time, okay? And if they have some missing time, there's a high chance that there was some abuse in their childhood, and that may mean that they have a dissociative base, okay? Now, this is far more prevalent than you think, but unfortunately, child abuse and stuff like that and really sick stuff is more prevalent than people think. It gets hard to accept how fucked up this is, but this is an industrialized level of MKUltra. That main class wasn't the one brainwashing people, okay? But then there was people that would get removed to like another subclass. It would either be, a sub-GATE project, a billion names. It could be anything. They get snatched up by some people called the associates. There's been a thing called the finders. That was like a super extreme example. Most of it's really passive, and you wouldn't be able to tell much because a lot of this, we'll get into it, is technology. But essentially is they're putting these people through psionic testing. The psionic testing also tests for like susceptibility and basically like if they're highly suggestible. And again, 30% of the population is considered highly suggestible technically. But like there's like a 10% that have enough dissociative base, okay? It doesn't mean that 10% are getting programmed, no. But like, there's like 10% that may have enough dissociative base. But then within those 10%, who got snatched to get programmed? So like you're having to have someone that had that base abuse, right, that they identify and they get in there. So they might not just be psionically gifted. It might just be that people were susceptible to brainwashing. And then that's where massive amounts of people are been getting funneled off to side projects. Sometimes they get pulled off and it would be under the guise of like speech therapy or vocation, or they basically kind of like convince a child that they had something. Because I've heard of plenty of people, I already know this to be a fact, but like I've heard of plenty of people that are like, basically told them something was wrong with them and went to some classes that they didn't even think they need. This is all it takes. And then they end up routing these children, off to this, essentially the brainwashing machine. Okay. And I mean, this has happened at a level that, I mean, it's astonishing. Okay.
Dude,
what?
can I say something really fast?
Yeah.
You just made me think of something. This is going to sound really weird. I've told people before, like when I was a kid growing up, the elementary school I went to, I remember one day getting, and I'm not trying to say like I had some of these experiences, but this was like really strange, like, and to put it through the context of like what you're talking about, because it's always never made any sort of sense to me when I've thought about it retrospectively, right? That I got invited to go with a like a counselor to a computer lab at lunch for I don't even know how many times this happened to me, but it felt like a long time throughout school. And I remember that I got invited by one of the other kids, and I wasn't, at first the teacher, I remember being hesitant about me being there, but then let me like hang out. But I do remember being able to eat my lunch there. And then a couple of times that the other kids there were playing on the computer. I say playing on the computer because they were on the computer. And when I asked about getting on the computers, I was told I wasn't allowed to because I wasn't in the program. And I remember this lady used to show like these like yellow cards and stuff to us and like ask us what we thought about them and shit like that. And I don't know, they just like, I've never gotten an explanation. I've even told my parents about like, what was all that about, you know? And, they're like, I have no idea, because I even remember a few times getting pulled out of class by the same counselor to go, but I was never allowed to go into like this little back room where these other computers were, some of these other kids were going on. I still have no idea what that's about, but like, and that could be totally unrelated, I guess, because nothing ever happened to me that I like, you're talking about, but it's really strange because it was, like a program where they were like gauging. She was 100%, when you think about it this way, he was gauging our capabilities and abilities to understand things and asking us questions, and then having us re-explain them to her in a different way, right? But I don't know. That's just kind of weird. You saying that made me like really think about that through that lens. Just kind of weird.
That's the reason why I brought the GATE program up. I was actually put into the GATE program following an assessment that was done at the end of my kindergarten year. And I entered into the GATE program in my first grade year. I was carried on through the GATE program all the way through 7th grade. And there was lots of isolated incidents, lots of tonality, lots of sessions sitting through headphones. Now, of course, I'm older than you gents, so back at the time where all that stuff was being done, the computers that were available were like Apple IIe pluses. There was not, people weren't on the internet. So things were done with a lot more audiology. There was a lot of tests that were done where there was a lot of whispering, a lot of asking if you had retention of certain things. I was in the GATE program for science and English originally, and then I was moved on into GATE activities that had to do with like external, like things for like musical prodigies and things like that as well. Going through, but I never thought anything much of it. And, I've spoken about it a million times that I was in the gifted and talented programs growing up. But there was always, these sessions where you'd be taken out of class for like 45 minutes and you were put in a separated room.
Yeah.
And,
I remember
myself
one time,
and one other person in that program in my little school to begin with. It was myself and a young girl. She actually died of brain cancer in her mid-20s. And I found that out through an associated person that we both were singers, and we were external members of a chamber choir as a specialty singing group in high school that we were put into. It was a large adult program, and the original director of that ended up being a client of mine in technology later on down the road, and it mentioned to me that that girl had died of brain cancer right after she got married in her mid-20s.
No, interesting. Sorry for derailing your thought. No, just like was like
that is why I asked, because I heard rumors about that after the fact. Somebody brought it up to me one day, and they were like, "Dude, that was all like a big experiment and stuff like that." And I was like, "What?"
Well, I can explain a little bit more actually, but this is perfect that y'all bring this up, right? So, I had mentioned the people are found through talent. It was originally Project Talent, made by John C. Flanagan. That was the military person who selected combat fighter pilots, right? So, it originally was Project Talent. Then there's different talent, and a lot of them are like some variation of talent identification program. Whatever it is. Like there's just through the ages, there would be different names for it. But what goes with that is also something by Flanagan. was called Plan Program. So going way back, and this was, I think, like 64 or something, I don't know, but whenever Plan Program came out, it was essentially they, had the different types of groups of, like, they obviously have like the occupational handbook and all that, right? So they already had this kind of charted out, and if they identified people through talent and they would put them through gifted and talented, they would essentially get a personalized curriculum, right, plan. So don't get me wrong, that might mean you go to all the other classes except for one extra one. Or in some extreme cases, right, if someone, I guess, at that young, according to their rules and getting ready, right, then they might think, okay, it needs a few different things, right? No telling. But this was all the start of to where these people that were identified in these are charted to where their files are kept a little bit better, like for sure. And they started charting them on computers, though. And then also that they get personalized curriculum. And it's kind of like a long-term plan. And it's like if they're enrolled in it, period, even if you don't go to all the gifted and talented classes all through the years, if you get selected by talent, you're still hooked up to where they're kind of like watching you. Like they might be like, to this day, right, looking at your browser history and seeing, what you ping on so they can try to best advertise to some people. Like this stuff is like the beginning basis of stuff being hooked up and them learning about the population in a wide thing and, learning basically, they're studying the people. Even if you look up the original Project Talent, they studied the people and even followed up questions later in life. Like it's still going. But so that was the start of that. So like if you were in GATE and they do a lot of individual things, like, it's just they come up with these different plans and it's integrated in it and it's a whole system, right? And so it's not just GATE, it's, it's talent. If you're in GATE, they already found you through talent or some variation, but then you just might go to different classes, but there could be other things go on behind the scenes that you would never know about, and being like National Defense Education Act, right? You got to understand, they got to find people like, they have systems just like they had, systems dinging to see like terrorists that swap SIM cards in something literally called Skynet. If y'all had heard about that, the NSA Skynet, right? So like, you know about that. It's like, well, they're also tracking their own citizens, right? Maybe they have one that they think would make a good nuclear physicist and we need nuclear physicists. Or maybe they think one that, comes from, their parents are foreign and they think they might be higher percent to be a dissident, right? Maybe they're, like, okay, we need to give them some extra curriculum. Whatever it is, there's things like that, which makes sense, like no big deal, right, for the national security. But intertwined with all this, because the same people that involve this, Jacob Javits, right, MKUltra, the same people who are tied in with this, there's a series of testing, and if they know that these children went through the base programming that they had through the pedophile foster kids, they had through the gangs where they taught them that and they knew they went through it, whatever it is, it's able to identify them, if that makes sense. And then they end up getting funneled further, and those are the kids that they will pull and actually put in these brainwashing programs. Now, when there's certain, like, for example, the hearing tests, that's the sort of thing that it's like, okay, well, I had hearing tests, and someone was like, well, I did too, but mine were this. Well, if they're giving everybody hearing tests, if one person talks about getting brainwashed from their hearing test, you have everybody else saying, no, well, I wasn't, so you're crazy, right? Makes sense. Doesn't mean everybody had the same hearing test. People might get all the same pink drinks, but like maybe someone got pulled aside extra once they got selected in that, and that pink drink actually has a memory inhibiting agent, right? Something like that. Or maybe everybody got memory inhibiting agent just for a certain questionnaire that they don't want out, right? Like whatever it is, like, there was kids getting tested in here and polled, and if they went through that base programming, okay, they would get identified. Okay, so there were ways, once you get into, you're in the GATE and you're in the network and all that, like this is very non-believers. We talked about some people are with the cult stuff, some people aren't. But what's important to know is that basically the godfather of GATE, the curriculum, is John C. Gowan, Gowan. And what he wrote is a series of books, okay, that goes in, it goes into some of the work from Dabrowski, which is called Positive Disintegration, okay, which is essentially the same thing about splitting the mind and into pieces, into blocks, and then rebuilding it back in a stronger formation, like a pyramid, right? So basically disintegrating someone's personality and building it up structure. That's Dabrowski. Okay. So Gowan took that same thing, and Gowan took what is called, he took all the mysticism, the dissociative states. We're talking about like, astral traveling. We're talking about like into like the yogis, into like Tibet, into like everywhere, right? He wrote several books about like consciousness and all this, but what he essentially did was he took all the magical occult path working, and then he wrote books converting them to scientific nomenclature. Okay, and then integrated some of this into, he was the godfather of gate curriculum. So basically the guy was taking mysticism terms and occult terms and basically changed them and rewrote the book, making it like sound like scientific and normal, demystifying it. Okay. So one example of this, like hitting it, was like, you hear about these kids being tested for the psionic stuff, because we're about to get to here with the psionic assets and all this. You hear about kids getting tested for this in their curriculum. Now, part of the Stargate curriculum, if you're familiar with Stargate, people know that the Monroe Institute Gateway Voyage is part of that, which is essentially headphones, and it walks you through a process while doing brainwave entrainment. And essentially what it does is like teach you to project your conscious, teach you to like feel you're more than your body. Like it takes you on a kind of like a mystic journey in a very scientific way. Okay. It's like really scientifically based. And like some of this, for this dissociative, like, you know, you have your left brain and your right brain. And, you know, like your right brain that controls your left hand, like it's more like creative and stuff like this, where then the left brain controls the right hand is more analytical. So to really let that like right brain, like if you're going to have someone remote view, right? Or if you're going to have someone do like that, like you don't want the other hemisphere that's more analytical to interfere. It's like, oh, I can't do this, or try to make it up or something like that. You kind of want to just let it do its thing. So sometimes like when stuff's presented scientifically, it kind of like satiates that and allows the brain just to do what they want. So you have that Monroe Institute Gateway Voyage. And if you look that up, like that is declassified under the Stargate. And like, if you look up Monroe, like all it's declassified, that they absolutely use that together. Now, the funny thing is that Stargate was shut down by essentially a report that came out from American Institute for Research, okay, which said basically it didn't work. Said it didn't work. It wasn't actionable. It didn't provide actionable intelligence, okay? There's a lot of other, you know, information out there from SRI International, all these people that it refutes that, but still, the fact is that this report did come out. Now, the funny thing is that happened right in 94, 95, right? Well, guess what else happened? Right around then, there was a concern about the Gifted and Talented Education Act, who, again, this was put out by Jacob Javits, who does the Education Act. And what they were doing was it describes the exact curriculum from Stargate. It actually described the psionic testing. It described trying to get kids to do telekinesis, you know, so on and so forth, and remote viewing and imagining all that, and talks about charting their information, okay, and all this. These are the kids that went into this program. Maybe they were actually a psionic asset. Maybe they were just programmed into sleeper. But what happens is once they get actually put into this sleeper asset program, right, or just human asset program, what happens is, you know, they go through the thing to where they'll have them basically, you know, in the workbook or on different assignments, to where they show their different emotions. They're asking them about things about their dreams, things that they'll never remember and can be used against them later in life, right? Things to see what comes through. It's a whole workbook, and basically it goes into a file and can be used to covertly pull strings, right? But at the same time, some of these kids are selected for this psionic asset. So the same curriculum from Monroe Institute that was used for Stargate was definitely used, including the actual headphones and the actual Gateway Voyage was actually used in some of those sub-projects, like one that's known as Odyssey, right? That's one of them. That one also turned out a lot of, unfortunately, people into sleepers and other things. But again, this same curriculum.
Now this is the same Monroe Institute that's still operating, correct?
Yes. And it's about to get worse. It was also the other one that was involved with Silva Method, okay, by Jose Silva. And he was Army, and he developed, which is basically, it uses the tones to stimulate, and basically people do self-hypnosis. And when they get real deep, they might like make like touching these two fingers a trigger to like bring them back, kind of like a post-hypnotic suggestion, right? If they close their eyes and do this, they get back in that deep state instantly. It's like it's a passcode. It's like a safe state. They might do it with another finger. There's all sorts of different methods. But so what was happening is, slowly over time, these things that got integrated in with it. So you have American Institute for Research saying Stargate didn't work, right? And the curriculum matches up with this stuff that we know of. Jacob Javits, the person who made the Gifted and Talented Education Act, tied in with MKUltra. But guess who who said that the Stargate curriculum didn't work? That said Stargate didn't work and shut down. It was the same John C. Flanagan who made Project Talent, who was selecting the kids to go in for the testing using these same methods. So what I'm saying is, you have the same people that set up the whole industrialized brainwashing machine, where it runs them in, tests them, gets tested, see if they're selected for it, enrolls them in talent, push them through the necessary gate classes, and if they can get brainwashed. And it's the same people saying, hey, no, these methods don't even work. When they're running. So it's these same people where obviously you have these people, and these are the people that are tied again to these societies like Malta and so on and so forth. And even the ones that are non-believers and are kind of doing this like scientific nomenclature, again, it's still the same mysticism. It's just a different theme, okay? It's just like you have, maybe the people at the very top tier have families that have been doing this for a long time and they're actually into this occultic aspects, they'll do that. But you have some people that just do more of the technology, right? Then you have some people like on the street gang levels. You still have some of these 5-point stars, some of these 6-point stars, some of the occult knowledge and some of that path working, but it's a little bit more like physical abuse, right? And like kind of like more hands-on. So you have different themes of this, but it's still the same recipe, okay? It's still the same recipe of occult principles that affect different parts of the mind and eventually build off disassociation. It's just all this required is a little bit of childhood abuse with a dissociation, and it creates a workable asset. Whether they get funneled through any area, they have the net in school with the gate and all of those, just to catch the ones that do it. They have the other people, outside here, outside there. So it's just a wide range, and it's churning out different types of assets. Obviously, again, you have the sex slaves and then the like espionage spies going through these parties, right? Getting linked up with all this. You have, some of the enforcers might be more tied in with the drug and human trafficking that are also taking care of a lot of these, honeypots and sex slaves and being the procurers. So you have this whole bottom level working with each other and against each other, right? And putting each other through the steps, while the top level is orchestrating this. And they just essentially understand and have already just set up the infrastructure where all this is happening aside from them, okay? So the thing here is where this gets is that going back to how I guess you have the Malta had set up, with Oliver North and that whole crew had set up DeFEMA and set up Rex 84, okay, to where basically rounding up American citizens, dissidents, so on and so forth. So the thing here is that the people that set that up are actually the ones that hold all the knowledge and have implemented these different things that are already happening lower down to condition people with certain things. And when it comes to the actual brainwashing part, okay, to where it actually makes so someone is like remotely accessible and everything, they are the ones with the keys to this, okay? When they have their people, because they have their people in military intelligence and all these, all these areas, what they will do is they will have like their people, whether they're actually a clandestine in the clandestine services or they're just, using them and managing them from there. They run a bunch of people in these tied up at the national security level, red teams, oppositional forces. So if they get caught doing some traitorous activity, they play it off like it was red team. Okay, this is a huge problem. This is where the heavy concentration of this is. Not just clandestine services, which overlaps with this. It's the oppositional forces. It's the red teams. That's where they're doing the heavy concentration. Other than that, up in oversight. So what can happen here is when people actually get programmed, that's what we're coming to now is when people actually get programmed, because you have this light conditioning and you have this, all this passive, the same the same imagery. You know, you have these same colors. You have these different things that they made sure were present, right? That they want to tie to certain activations and stuff like this. When it gets to that point, there's two main ways. And one of these is with a ritual, okay? And then the other is essentially what they turned into, like the programming thing, which is what's called transcranial magnetic stimulation. Okay. Now, back in 94, 95, maybe it was a little bit before then, again, right to when the 1995 ACHRE blew, right? It had also came out that they had what was called the Stanley Coren God helmet. Okay. And this was just a helmet that went on and had different like solenoids and created light electromagnetic fields to stimulate the brain. And they essentially, you know, just had so many on there, and they would just program it to where, you know, it could do a variety of effects. Even at that level, it could stimulate different parts of the brain. Now, what they modeled this after, it's the same thing. You have rituals that do the same thing as what this is doing. Essentially, they stimulate different parts of the brain to have a desired effect. And this is like how people actually get programmed, because it's important. You already have this trauma. You already have everything. You're trying to actually get like someone, you know, a slave that you can order around, essentially, right? Because this is what you have to understand, that when we talk about, okay, how could someone possibly be a sleeper asset and not know about it, right? How could this even be? How is this possible? How can we have people within our own special forces, right? How could we have a politician? How can we have a basketball player actually have a mind-controlled personality? So here's where it's from. You obviously already have this link all the way to childhood. There's just a few things that need to be satisfied. And here's where it goes to the gruesome part. I mean, you know, what I was saying is, you know, if you unfortunately think about how bad you could scare a child, right? You know, and you scare them into not talking, you scare them into this. The important thing is to remember, so it all goes back to the childhood abuse. Because that disassociated part, right, that ends up staying up, that disassociated part only comes up to deal with a specific type of trauma. It's a mental defense, and that's why it was created. Yes, a lot of things have been reinforced over time, right, of course. So it reinforces it and kind of like bonds it to something, but like still, it's just that same type of trauma. That's why it all came up, regardless of what it got built into. And that part is separate, okay? And essentially, on the extreme, it can be a complete split personality. And that's what they're looking for, essentially, is deep down, you know, someone has to be functional, and they might passively condition them, right, to just act certain ways and, you know, and from the outside influence, like that's one aspect of behavior modification. But the direct aspect is we're talking about a sleeper persona. So what actually has to happen for that sleeper persona to actually exist and actually work? Well, a few things have to be satisfied. One, they have to be utterly convinced that the threats that they're facing are real and will be carried out, and that that's possible. Okay, you know, if you're going to submit to a threat, obviously you feel threatened. It has to be successful, you know? So these people have to basically know that, hey, if I don't listen up, I'm fucking, you know, these people are going to kill me. They're going to kill who I love. They're going to do whatever. It has to be credible threats, okay? And there has to be the same environment. Other than that, there actually has to be agreeable ideology, okay? Because this is what's happening. If you trigger me, if you trigger someone else, and they think I have a sleeper persona, like what's going on? They're going to come out. Why would they follow through with that orders? Are they just under robotic control? It's two-faced, because we're going to break this down exactly. Well, the thing is that these people, when they're young and develop this abusive personality, a lot of the part when they're actually disassociate and become this disassociated part, there can be an element of Stockholm syndrome to that, but it's all about the training and the belief. And that's why when you get into here, okay, the pedophile part, that's not really where this belief comes into, right? So we'll hold that for a second. But when you get into all this occult, that's why all these people are tied to a religion, because what they believe in and what's taught is that there is like a golden age, like a new world coming, right? And that they have a place in it. And that if they don't go along with it, that they will be killed, that the worst things will happen and they will only suffer. If they do go along with it, it will be better for them and they will prosper. Okay? It's like, if you take someone, you might not just be able to get, so you know, they don't just make a kid kill someone else in a ritual and say, okay, now you're in the club, right? They don't want to do that. It's not like someone that comes and willingly joins a gang that might be running away from an abusive situation. But what this is they'll give them a double bind. They'll say, like, look, you know, kill this cat. You know, if you don't kill the cat, we're going to kill two, you know? So then they kill another and say, okay, do this one. It'll be the last one. Otherwise, we're going to keep going. Okay. You know, they might see a couple, just stop it. Okay, fine. I'll put it out of its misery, because at that point, you're actually doing good in your own mind, because you know if you don't step in and actually stop it, what you're learning deep down on a deep lesson is that, oh, I'm putting this out of his misery because these sick people are going to keep doing that, you know?
Right.
But, you know, teaching this person to do that and putting them through that, you say, fuck, I hate to do this, but, like, you know, I gotta harden this motherfucker. We gotta get this motherfucker ready for the world. You're already jaded by the time you're fucking, you know, doing this sort of thing. Like, this is no joke, you know? So, I mean, even if they don't want to get with it, you know, essentially, and some people will, right? Just depending on what they've already been through and shit like that. But even if they don't want to, like, it's presented them to where they're actually doing a favor. So one of those, like, that makes an impact for life. But, like, that's the sort of double bind that you're getting ready to gear into for the whole time. Like, and then only from there on, it gets more and more and just more desensitized, more stair-stepped, and you start, say, climbing the ranks, right? So this is for the believers that believe in this, okay? You know, basically they get them in with double binds, they introduce them to this, and then they also give them a taste of power, and they give them a taste of this. Like, you know, they have people around. It's not just that they're threatening them. When they're grooming somebody, they also give them rewards. It's not just, hey, do this, do that, or you're going to die, or, oh, we just made you kill something. No, then there'll be sexual pleasure. Then there'll be this. Then there'll be that, you know? At the same time, when they're really young, the thing is there's, like, stages to where it's passive reinforcement. Like, you know, like, if, say, they'll be in a situation where if they talk about it, they know it's going to go bad for them, right? But if they're quiet about it, and say if they, like, actually did the thing last night, they might, like, get, like, a surprise, right? And they'll be told in this other thing, like, basically, like, something good will be coming, and then something good will happen. Like, these people are, like, orchestrating little things, but it's not that hard if you have a child, unfortunately, right? So, like, these sick occultic believers are, you know, just ritualistically practicing and brainwashing these kids, but it's believable, because what has happened so far in that kid's life, it's actually true. You know, they finally turned over and killed that cat, and then they stopped killing the cat, right? They might even promise not to the next day. And then they, you know, obviously, unfortunately, like, you know, it goes, there's different type of pleasure. For a kid, it might not be sexual gratification. They might give them a candy. They might give them some money. Like, who knows? It can be anything. But it's just like, unfortunately, like, if you think to yourself, like, if you're trying to teach certain lessons and trying to harden something off for something, and say you just know you got to basically raise an enforcer, like, you know, you can put them through things and basically affect their psychology. The way that these things are formed are by people who understand psychology on a deep level. And when we say occult path working, I say that because there's already a fucking recipe, okay? There's a specific set of stair steps that you go through, and then guess what? Just like with a kid, they might skip a grade. Well, guess what? You might skip a couple here and there, but generally you're sticking to the same curriculum and going on, right? And what they get to learn as they grow up, and if you're going up in the occult, is that, hey, some of us are involved with this, and we look out for each other. And guess what? These other motherfuckers don't know what the fuck's going on, and we run this fucking world. And they see that. They see that, okay? You know, and even subconsciously they see that, because there's little symbology that they see during these intense times, right, that are embedded with different things everywhere. And you hear all this shit, like, you know, oh, they're all about their numbers, oh, 33, oh, this, that, right? Well, guess what? Guess what people see and what's really heavily involved during some of these rituals and what they bring up? The same shit that they mirror everywhere. And it reminds everybody that's involved who's in power. That's all it has to be. It's just a marker, subconsciously and reinforcing it. And the people put it there. It's like a lot of this symbology and a lot of these things that you hear about. It's like, okay, it would be everywhere. Oh, that's not that. That's not that. I mean, sure, it's not always that, right? But a lot of the time it will be. And you'll find
what are some of these symbols?
I mean, you have your stuff like 33, I mean, go to, obviously you got the spirals, but like, I mean, there's so many symbols. Like it's ridiculous. Like I'll tell you one thing is, you'll hear about like brainwashing. You hear about, if you look into this, that a lot of kids are brainwashed with like Disney and shit. And it's like, well, why would they be brainwashed like Disney? Because who's going to believe a kid that says, hey, Mickey Mouse abused me? Because they're going to be like, what? Mickey Mouse abused you? Like, what are you talking about? Right? That's ridiculous. So they'll like literally, these sick people, and this is what they train them to do, to like dress up as Mickey Mouse, dress up as this. And there's different themes, okay? Like there's a lot of different themes. And what these themes are made, you'll notice, like, for example, Alice in Wonderland is one. Alice in Wonderland is based on an age-old occult tale that's way old. It actually gets more gruesome, right? But like all these, right? You hear all these are age-old occult tales that have been told with a new theme. And then, they'll dress up like a character, they'll do this. And then there's things that people that went through this will see in the media, and it will mirror it, and it will reinforce it because they subconsciously see that. They say, oh shit, this is that. It just passively reminds them of this. This whole game is from a network of people, whether it's the Dragon Societies, whether it's Malta, whatever, that have been running things for so long. They have their symbols, okay, that will be apparent whenever these rituals are taking place, whenever whatever's taking place. And it will drill in. If you just see this stuff, right when the trauma is, like, like people have this flashback. Sometimes they can only see like the wall, like they won't, until they remember other things. Like, it's like this affects. It's just simple neuroscience, right? It's just behavioral neuroscience. Right. Like it just drills it in, and they use certain symbology that is really prevalent places just to constantly reinforce, and it's just a total mind fuck on every level. It's so incredibly deep. So how are these people, still doing this? Just on the occult side, they've been stair-stepped into it and desensitized to it, and they essentially believe that, they're part of a global cult, that has people everywhere and is getting their way. And that if they get activated, and that part comes out because, by the time it gets to the part where you're activated, obviously it's linked up to a trigger or whatever like that. And that's like conditioning, but like the ideology, it's there. I mean, unfortunately, people that have went through this, it usually doesn't go too good if they speak out. So, it's like you understand what these people are up against. Even if they become disillusioned through it, it's a mountain for them to climb. So it's just, these people have been stair-stepped into just absolute submission and absolute, it's just chaos. But at the same time, some of them, and the ones that actually keep on moving up, become infatuated and addicted to it and get it in on it. Because if they don't, as part of the step of bringing up there, they get burnt and get took out. So the thing is, too, it's hard for people to understand, how is it everybody? How is it everybody? Well, the thing is, it's not everybody. It's a lot of these people at the top in these little rich areas, because those were the people out of everybody. And, when they finally got brought up there, that's what it is. So it's fucked. So anyways, I'm rambling here about this, but like,
no, you're good.
I mean, the occult, that's the occult side. Now for the technological side, again.
Can I ask a question real fast?
Yeah.
Earlier you said these people are worshiping. Could you explain more about what, like, is this like literal worship? Or is this just like perceived worship?
So there's people that, think it's just perceived worship, right? And they might do it as a means to an end. Because, again, whether it's placebo, if the child got a spirit, if it didn't get a spirit, who cares? If he thinks he has a spirit and you point and tell him to kill and he, does a frenzy, right? But at the very top, I wholeheartedly believe that they believe that there is worship. And I will tell you that there is phenomena, and there is phenomena elicited, and that there is reality to some of the sick practices. And, you know, what is everything? There is some weird shit out there. And, you know, whether it's an egregore or whatever, like just the power of your mind that creates it, you know, whatever it is, there is external phenomena. And there are people that actually worship spirits. And there is a sophisticated system that's well documented and goes way back and is, you know, very organized. And I mean, that's what all this is based on. What all this is based on is actually a real worshiping system. Just like, you know, that they, you know, at different churches, they'll learn different things. But like, I mean, you know, you got the Golden Dawn, right? Like, they'll take you through a step. And this is something that people consciously join, obviously, right? But this is something that they'll go through processes, and they have specific deities that they'll invoke, this and that, you know, OTO, O9A, all these, you know. I had spoke on the Lesser Key of Solomon, right? Which, you know, has got the 72 seals and then overseen by Baal, right? So, you know, that when you get to the mind control, when you're actually getting to this occult path working for mind control, yeah, you're looking at the Lesser Key of Solomon. There's a lot other than this too, and there's different themes and there's different parts of this. But the Lesser Key of Solomon has specific deities that are, you know, basically linked up to different parts of the brains and different functions, and essentially breaks you down and traumatizes you to where then in the moment you can essentially change something in you. But is there phenomena? People experience phenomena. People experience some of the same phenomena from doing the same thing, right? So, you know, like, and meet some of these same entities.
It's like repeatable. Like two different people don't know each other can do the same thing and get the same result, essentially, or similar.
Exactly. Result. You hear about these people. Have you heard about people now taking DMT deliberately to map the DMT realm? Have you heard of this?
I have, yeah. There's like people who say there's creatures that they see and they are describing the same thing, right?
Yes. So, I mean, it's on this aspect. It's on this aspect of things. You don't put a lot of stock in that, just kind of from like So, I mean, here's the thing is, I know it to be real. You know,
okay.
It's too much for some people to accept. These people that are ruling the world at the top of the dragon societies and at the top of the Jesuits, they 100% worship deities. They worship entities, and they worship what's rumored to be physical, that there is even physical aspects of this, okay? And we're talking
like
about
physical being?
We're
like
talking
on this plane?
That can be on this plane, yes. We are talking about, you know, what many rumor about, you know, call them what you want. Some people say, oh, is it Nephilim? Oh, is it fallen angels? Oh, is it old gods? Is it this and that? All of this same thing going back, you know, whether it be Egyptian mysteries, whether it be Babylonian blasphemy, whether it be the Mayan worship, you know, whether it be at the top of Freemasonry, you know, whether it be the Rosicrucians, whatever it is, whether it be what the Malta are doing. These people partake in a system that converges, and it might have slightly different nomenclature, but they actually swear oaths to certain things. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but this is something that, you know, that everybody at the top of this treats very real and dead serious, because that's what it is. And I absolutely rebuke it. I want to be clear, if, you know, getting into this. Oh, I beyond rebuke it, and I have denounced it, you know, quite heavily.
No, absolutely.
Yes,
yeah.
And, you know, moving on to destroy, but, I mean, this is the most sick, heinous stuff. And the reason that people become so obsessed with this at the top part is because they're believers. And, you know, you have to know something. You have to know something about this. We only see in this much of the energetic spectrum, okay? And this is the spectrum right here. Cameras can see more than your eye, okay? And there's all sorts of stuff up there. Just like you can't see the gut biome that affects your brain, you know? Just like you can't see
brain.
Just like you can't see the parasites in cat poop that actually, you know, can get in humans and affect their brain. Just like you can't see the parasites that are microscopic that pass from lizard embryo to the lizard offspring. There are energetic consciousnesses that get in folks that are not, you know, that are not physical, but there are energetic consciousness. There is an energetic virus, if you will, that can actually be measured if they're looking for the right thing with the right laboratory equipment and a Faraday cage, and they have the brain hooked up. And if someone does an invocation, you can see that, on an fMRI, you can see that brain activity. It will do something. So that's one thing. You have these energetic consciousnesses and this parasitic activity. But and they're said that there is some of these species of parasites that are known to grow more in these lifelong practices, and that and these practitioners, and that these entities help host some of these attributes and also affect the function. So are these things manifesting as parasites, and that's just building up, and that's what it is, and it's hooking up to consciousnesses? There are forces that we just don't understand fully. But if you get looking, and I don't recommend it, but if you get looking in some of this old lore, if you get looking deep into this, this is explainable and known to these practitioners. If you get with, these adept necromancers, high-level Rosicrucians, necromancy covers a lot, right? But, if you get into these adepts, yes, they'll tell you this is all very real. And there's energetic consciousnesses, there's parasites, physical and energetic parasites, but then there is also other things that they believe and that can take physical form, some in physical form, and there are things that many swear allegiance to and swear oaths to. And at the very top, this is what they believe in, and they believe that there is, wars coming. They believe, that they will create biblical prophecy even. Like these are people that are taught this.
Dude, this is wild, because you're describing essentially how these spiritual beings can manifest as parasites in human bodies. That you would just if you looked at them on a microscope, that they would look just like a fucking, worm parasite that you've seen on a TV program or something like that. But it's actually some sort of spiritual warfare is essentially what you're saying.
Yes. Well, so some of these people, there's like energetic virus, like you hear of the hitchhiker effect, right? Like, now I'm not saying I'm not saying that is a microscopic parasite, but what I'm saying is when you have lifelong practitioners of this, now they're also like, might take part in cannibalistic activity. They might do this. Like there might be factors that would make them more susceptible to breeding actual parasites. I would give anybody that. But there is known to be a link between certain type of parasitic activity and hosts and hosting this kind of sick virus, because, these people, they do get a mind virus. What's going on are they just getting sick because of what they practice and they get more and more depraved? Is both true? Does it go hand in hand? I believe it's all of the above, but
I agree.
There is absolutely links between parasites and some of these lifelong practitioners and some of this, if you will, demonic activity, whether you want to call it demon or whatever you want to call it.
No, it's crazy to think about what you're saying, because you're talking about a measurable way of exhibiting this energy, like you said, and you were talking about like some of these frequencies and things like that you can measure while people are having these experiences. To me, it just sounds like a physical, measurable way of displaying the spiritual that goes on. Like this is like the energy that's being passed around, some of these same experiences that people are having through the processes of running through these protocols, that these energy shifts, as we're measuring them, as we know how to measure them, is the spiritual realm at play in these people's lives and in these processes. We're just looking at them through different lenses, but it's one and the same, sort of, to your point about how it's all of the above.
Exactly. And here's where it mirrors, because we've been talking about believers, but we were going to talk about the Stanley Corin helmet and the non-believers in the technology, because here's where it gets to be that the people, again, whether it's the Dragon Society, whether it's the Jesuits, or whether it's the believers or the non-believers, and I can explain, because they are all worshiping the same thing. And this is what it gets to, because there's certain powers and certain forces that go with this. So, these certain things, they tick certain boxes, they affect the brain, right? When you're going through this certain, this certain occult path working, certain rituals and certain practices will affect the brain in certain ways, and even like different seals correspond to different parts of the mind, so on and so forth. And there's specific, things said to where, you take oaths not to talk while you're doing something very painful or gruesome. And that way, like, you don't even have to think about it. If you went to talk, like, it would be a trigger, and like, you would get just a flash and like a deep thing, like, oh God, that's serious. Like, where did that come from? Like, I don't know if you've ever had anything embarrassing happening, you know, like, oh God, I don't want to think about that. Well, I mean, it's that times a million. Like, if you actually like, you know, did something really painful to yourself and try to remember something, like there will be a mind-body connection to that. But anyways, so what they were doing is when they were going through MKUltra and all this, you know, there was different, I'm not going to get into project names. They say, oh, under chatter, they say under this, they say under that. But the thing is that they would hook someone up to essentially an EEG that measures the brain activity, an fMRI, right? Stuff like that, whatever. If they had that back then, they do now. And, you know, what they would do is they would measure while someone did an invocation. They were doing these rituals and measuring the brainwave activity. Just like you have a monk and it would measure the brainwave activity. I'm not sure if you've seen that where they do that. It's the same deal. And what they were doing with the Stanley Corn helmet is what that was known was to basically they were stimulating like the religious center of the brain, or they would make them sense a presence, right? And they would have different things. Some sensitive people that were more susceptible to it would have like a whole experience. So again, just like the psionic people, right? It's kind of like you get to certain people that are prone to these experiences. Is it because they're intelligent and creative and kind of they make the experience all of themselves, or is it because they're attracted to something external? It's, you know, it's kind of like the chicken or the egg, but they're both present all the time, so there's some sort of relationship there. Yeah. Well, they start testing all this, and here's the important thing: if you get into Stargate, because this is all really hinges upon all this. You get into Stargate and all these things. What you would really find, think here how to explain this best. So essentially, you know, what you would find is that they had something called electronic perturbation. Okay. And electronic perturbation was where they would measure where human brain waves could, you know, humans could use essentially their mind power to affect electronics. Okay. That's documented. And if you look up electronic perturbation, you know, you go to Grill Flame, Stargate, all within there. Okay. Electronic perturbation, you know, Stanford Research Institute, all these people, there's tons of research into it. This is a major part of this. So humans can measurably have demonstrated measurably to affect, you know, actual like computer equipment. So here's the thing is that they started recording EEGs and fMRIs when people were doing invocations and would see how, you know, it would say, do that. It would say, I call it a consciousness, energetic virus, right? Say you would see kind of like it goes this pattern, right? They do this invocation, you get activity here. They do this invocation, activity here, so on and so forth, whether it's the Wernicke's area, whether it's the temporal lobe, so on and so forth. So the thing is, then essentially that's where they really got it down, was the best mind control aspects that they operationalized with this technology was actually based on invocations, based on the, you know, the oaths that people would take that are linked up with certain actions, and then what brainwave activity that would actually elicit. Okay. And this is really what it comes down to here is that if humans have been able to measurably affect electricity, you know, measurably affect these computers, do we think that like this energetic virus couldn't? If this is something that, you know, people are worshiping and interfacing with, do they not think that can affect it? Because that's what we're getting down to here. And there has been phenomena when this comes up to where, again, hitchhiker effect, so on and so forth like that. And a lot of this, even portrayed on TV, is actually behavioral modification. And they found that when there's certain stimulation that they have reproduced from this, you know, there's kind of unknown fluctuation, and they don't quite understand what that is. Because when you're messing with these frequencies and they're using some of the techniques that were derived from occult terms, things happen, you know, consciousness, energy kind of has, you know, a mind of its own and just kind of does things sometimes. And it's not really powers that people can completely control. This technology, you know, they've got it now to where now it can be done remotely. And this is what we're facing here. So I'm just real quick going to say basically what the helmet did, and now link this going to like the psionic asset and basically lay it out about the psionic assets. But like, I mean, you get it. Here's the thing: is obviously you have the whole aspect where they're fucking grooming people and doing this, and some people come up through the occult path working, and some people hit this technology. If they're getting pulled into the government aspect of this, it's 100% that they go through what's called the helmet, and they get this process done that I'm about to explain.
Okay.
And this is this is what it's about. Is essentially a lot of this is hinged on stimulating the temporal lobe. And this will basically can cause vivid imagery, okay? And it can make it feel personally significant. You can feel things are important, and you can really accept it. That's through stimulating the temporal lobe, okay? You can also get some pleasant feelings like that. Then they stimulate the Wernicke's area. The Wernicke's area is like linguistics. So basically, you can really like stick the scripts. They use Ericksonian hypnosis scripts. Ericksonian hypnosis scripts essentially go with your psyche. That's what they're known to be. It's not like you don't want to like go against someone's belief and go against their will. If you know someone about something and everything, you give them a story. You might even help them create it to go along with it, and essentially, step them through it to program them. So with these helmets, it's not just that they put the people in a helmet and stimulate their brain and then say words to them. They can shoot patterned messages. And this was coming out in the mid-90s, that this was just with a helmet, with the God helmet. They could sense presences. They could, stimulate their brain. And what they would do is shoot patterned messages into them. And say if these people got selected through the GATE sub-project, whatever it is, say some of these people got tapped into this military program, whatever it is, they get the people hooked up to the helmet. Or an fMRI and the helmet. It depends. If they've already had the fMRI and see how they, and have mapped their brain, they've mapped it enough. But, they obviously have to get the map of this. But once that's done, all they have to do is they stimulate the Wernicke's area, they stimulate the temporal lobe, and they shoot a patterned message, okay, that will be customized to this person. And the base programming that every single one of these assets gets is gamma and omega. Okay. And they can have things where they slightly change the name, but this is where it gets to be a tragedy, and why people are in so much danger when we're getting to these psionic assets, because it's not just psionic assets, okay? That's 1 in 10,000 that has this talented ability, and there is tons of people with this programming, and we're gonna get to this Pentagon Secrets Army and all that, because this is all tied together. But every single one of these people, if they went to be a psionic asset, if they went into the Pentagon Secret Army, or if they got pulled up into the official governmental work with this and actually were brainwashed with this machine, they will get gamma programming, which is a cover story. And a cover story is always at play, and it's passive, and it will basically be their narrative with life, okay? This is in this deep persona state. They're under deep hypnosis or somnambulistic hypnosis, and essentially it's patterned into their brain, audibly, non-audibly. It can just shoot right away. And if they have to be a politician, and they basically create a whole script. You have professionals that make this script, right? And you can program values into people as long as you're not straying too much from it, and it goes along with it. You stimulate and give them their values. You do whatever, and then what there is there's the active triggers, okay? And this is where it really gets bad, because you have gamma and omega active triggers. Sticking with gamma, because what happens is, just like if you give someone a post-hypnotic suggestion that say, hey, if you hear the bell, you're going to cluck like a chicken. Hey, you won't remember your name whenever, I snap, whatever it is. Instead, this is, if you discuss any authorized information, if you consciously remember this is going to happen, so on and so forth. So basically, they know that if they remember this, and they don't know, like this just automatically happens. If they automatically remember it, then the post-hypnotic suggestion will happen, and it will activate the gamma. And the way that they do this with the helmet, they can do it so fast now. It's the transcranial magnetic stimulation, again, stimulating the Wernicke's area for the linguistics, so they anchor it in, and the temporal lobe, so they really accept it, right? But what they're also stimulating here. Sorry, I'm having a hard time talking about this stupid. I have a hard time talking about this.
You're all right, man.
So, sorry. Sometimes when I go to these places, it just kicks up this stupid ass shit from other things. But
It's all right, man.
no, it's all good. It's all good. So, anyways, when it stimulates, they're sending them a pattern message to activate the gamma programming. And what they do is they have the full workup of the fMRI, and they're seeing the blood flow, they're seeing the neuron pathway information, and you already have this disassociated compartment because they've been selected through the process. They've already been vetted as an individual with the right level of dissociation. So they see this neural network is what it's called. And essentially this compartment of this disassociation to where all their life, say they've seen this certain point star, they've seen this color, they've seen whatever it is. They link this up and they can see the neuron pathways of the information. And they will literally use micro ECT in conjunction with the transcranial magnetic stimulation, and they burn out all the neuron pathways other than just the one bridge that's in and out of that, and that is through the activation trigger. So, they're getting them up. They, say it's going to be a blue triangle, whatever it is. Obviously, it's more layered than that, but that's kind of the neuron pathway that they allow to enter that fragmented state and make sure it can get activated, okay? And then that's where their gamma programming lies, and they stimulate the parts of the brain, but then the fail-safe, that automatic trigger is if they begin to consciously remember or they otherwise disclose unauthorized information to an outside party, that will be the trigger. And then what that will happen is they will send a patterned message, another patterned message, and they may have vivid imagery, they may have whatever it is. But essentially what happens is if they start talking about this or they remember too much, the post-hypnotic suggestion will go off and this gamma programming will activate, okay? And then they may receive a vision. They may just start hearing voices and think they're schizophrenic. They may think that they got a download from NHI. Okay, the way this can work is the pattern message, it might not be audible, but it is discernible. So they won't remember being hooked up to the helmet. They don't remember any of this. The post-hypnotic suggestion goes off so farther than that. The deepest programming is under the most trauma. So in order to find the deepest level of programming, they would have to dig all the way to the bottom of that. But when they just begin to dig, it goes into the activation, the fail-safe activation. And then so they'll get either a vision, just depending on what they're programmed with. They might get the vision, they might hear shit, or they might just feel like they get a download. And they have this themed. So, according to what brainwashing theme they had, it might be some Alice in Wonderland stupid shit, right? Well, the number one thing now is alien programming, okay? It's alien, NHI, UAP, whatever you want to call it. It has to do with UFOs and aliens. And people have been doing this for a long time. It was called Green Star. And guess what? This came out in the mid-90s, right? When the ACHRE broke and all this. And if you look up Walter Boart, Operation Mind Control, okay, Researcher's Edition, 800 pages, but you can look that up. There's a man named Martin Cannon. He put out a book, The Controllers. You can find a lot of information in that. There is just hordes and hordes of data. But so what's really going on now is, because there's all sorts of stuff, but what happens is that whenever someone starts remembering or disclosing that they were programmed, first, the gamma programming will activate. And what they'll start talking about is the craziest, stupid shit, or they'll talk about something else. Whatever it was, it will be designed to discredit them, to derail them, to mislead them, because again, they don't remember all of it yet. That goes off way ahead of time. And if you know people that have had like a phenomena experience, they get caught up in it. They don't know what the fuck's going on, and it's like one thing can upset them. So essentially, that will go off, and then they will just be lost in it, and that is the first step that happens. If they continue to pursue it, that's when Omega will activate. And there is no like passive Omega. The passive gamma is the cover story. The hard activate of the gamma is if they start digging, and then that's, the shell shock. So if that can't confuse them and get them off enough, and say if they contacted a journalist, right? Well, if they weren't like actually activated to contact that journalist on some shit, that would be unauthorized disclosure. Gamma goes off. So say then they're talking about some wild shit, but say maybe they like still can utter out some program code names. They mention some specific information, and it's still really getting there to where, although it's confused their disclosure or done something and caused them, or say they've got past it, then the Omega activates. And the Omega is suicide programming. And I want you to know, for all the whistleblowers that you see, like, there's a bunch of them, unfortunately, that didn't make it because of Omega. And this is the tragedy right now that's going on. Omega is twofold. When I say Gamma was twofold, that's because one's the cover story that's always at play, and then two, the active is the actual fail-safe. Well, Gamma is twofold fail-safe. One is that, Omega is twofold fail-safe. One is that they are actually programmed, with deep down, they'll be, in the state, and it's stimulating, again, this time, instead of the temporal lobe in their awareness area, it will still stimulate the awareness area for the script, but it will stimulate a part of their brain that gives them horrible feelings, right? The worst anxiety, the worst sadness, the worst depression, the worst fear. Sticking with that Ericksonian hypnosis script, right? Say this kid was in GATE and they had told some of their old dreams and desires, right? Tell them this, tell them that. Whatever it is, they have a workup on this person. And going along with their psyche, going along with their story, they will find something sad, something depression, something scary, something they care about. And they will use a customized script, a pattern message that sends to their head that will go and reflect on their real life. And essentially, it will be all about making sense that it makes sense to kill themselves. This is literally what's going on and applied mandatory to everybody that gets pulled up in here and is linked up to these UAP programs. If they're actually were operational involved with these UAP programmings, they have Omega. With these UAP programs, they have this Omega if they were at an operational level, okay? Because this is Manhattan level. Like, this is like Manhattan Project level classification. Like, it gets so intense. So this is justified on the grounds of national security. Because, so people can't share the secrets. They don't want their nuclear physicists to become disillusioned and then be spilling these secrets. So what happens is when this Omega programming activates, again, they won't know it's Omega programming. They don't remember being in the helmet. All of a sudden, they get flooded with these horrible feelings. It might not be like audible. Again, it's just a pattern message. But basically what sets off is that pattern message in the train of their head that will be something. It might be with their life because it expounds on whatever is available, and it's an Ericksonian script. And essentially, it will try to make it make sense that this person killed himself. And the sad thing is that a lot of times when people are in a place where they're whistleblowing already, or they're exposing this information, they've already came to such a bad place in life and are up against it that it's not hard to already be upset. And what happens is, since they don't know that this is actual programming, they basically just have a flashback and relive these horrible experiences, but they just have the flashback of the feeling. They're not seeing the helmet, and they project these feelings onto their current life, onto their current situation. And it makes a lot of people kill themselves. Twofold, because some people make it through that, okay? Yes, I mean, this is, and I hate talking about this shit, but like, this is actually exactly how it happens. They have them in an fMRI, in a transcranial magnetic stimulation helmet, the little micro ECT, wherever they see stray neuron pathways, zap that out, zap that out. Okay, we got a compartment. Okay, the only neuron pathway from that compartment is through the activation code, right? And it's down to such a science. But so the last part is they put them in somnambulistic hypnosis, clinical hypnosis. And a lot of times they're already in the somnambulistic level. But the thing about the somnambulism is that's the N3 sleep cycle. Sleepwalking is actually somnambulism. So what happens is they get these people in this fucking N3 sleep cycle, and then we'll program them again, this time stimulating the parts of the brain exactly having to do with like function and giving it little zaps, kind of like from even less than micro ECT. It's not just transcranial magnetic stimulation. And they actually kind of like do a function to where like, the people are like physically encouraged in a sleepwalking state to actually kill themselves. It's fucking utterly disgusting. And this is what's applied mandatory for people that are at this certain level of programs. If they had this Manchurian candidate level programming, they have base programming. This is base programming, gamma and omega. 100% of people have it. That's just simply what they put in because they can't have programmed people coming out and telling what they do know. I mean, it's just fucked. But this has happened. The people at the 1995 ACSRE disclosed this. She had mentioned that they tried to get her to kill herself. Like, this is just a thing. And people go digging, and they talk to survivors in this. Like, it's one of the known things. Not everybody realizes they had Omega programming, but all the information out there, verifies it, unfortunately. And this is just like the process because it's a self-regulating machine. Just like they get these proxies, in order to do the traffic. In order to cycle and do the pool, you know what I'm saying? It's the same thing. They get a self-regulating machine. This is a self-regulating mechanism, and that's what's installed in these people. So it gets utterly horrible, and yeah, I'm all over the place with this, but now what we're really at to is we're going to bridge this now to what's going on with the psionic assets, what's going on with the program transferring over, and basically explaining exactly what's happening with them switching over to the next level of this control through Foley wireless technology, just at a level that's so dangerous that like the people need to come together immediately and do something in demand, because the same people, the same group that have been running these programs, that ran these manual programs, with directly involved with the cult, directly involved with trafficking and all that, these same people are going to be in power. And just because things are cleaner, right? No one's doing anybody any favors. The level being ushered in is absolutely frightening. I know I'm all over the place, but do you have questions about this shit so far?
I got a couple questions, and then let's take a real quick break and come right back and get into all of that, like you just said. The things you're talking about made me think of most specifically the recent suicide of the OpenAI employee. And that one has always stuck out to me as really strange because not a lot of info came out about it. I did see an interview with the family who obviously and this isn't unique to this situation, but a lot of families are very surprised to hear that their loved one took their life, right? But then you consider a lot of the things that you're talking about, and then how closely OpenAI is working with the U.S. government now. And a lot of the conversations that like Larry Ellis and Sam Altman have had publicly and recently about, they even have something they're doing called Stargate now, right? Sam Altman came out recently and said that the humanity is going to have to adjust or change the social contract to allow for AGI to have a place within that social contract. So it's just like, going into what you've said about taking people out and, this Omega programming, this guy, the OpenAI guy was sort of a whistleblower, so to speak. And he killed himself, seemingly a happy guy, not, family very surprised, no indicators to his family about any of these things. And so obviously I don't think the answer, right? But like, this is the thing. If you do, or if you have opinions, obviously please give them. But that's the sort of thing that comes to my mind when you talk about this. Some of these suicides that make no sense, like the Boeing guy, the Boeing dude who was testifying and then killed himself in his car for no reason, like right before he was going to go testify for like the final time or something like that. There's just, a lot of these suicides, they don't make any sense. But the OpenAI one to me is incredibly interesting because it's definitely been memory hold. And then you just see just how much importance has been placed on OpenAI or XAI with like Elon, and a lot of these different things. Like if you talk about like controlling people's thoughts, artificial intelligence, and then eventually AGI, and then its incorporation into the Internet of Things and all of the the other facets of our life. Like now you're talking about something that is literally becoming a suggestive forcing function for human beings. You understand what I say by forcing function, right? It's a suggestive thing in your life that is artificial and has a small group of people who have the ability to control it, which is a lot of like what you're talking about. And the forcing function too, as well, what you're talking about, like forcing people to do certain things with programming. Like this just seems like, another vehicle for this sort of suggestive stuff that you're saying. It's just really weird to me, and a lot of this seems to have a lot of these same pathways and roads and patterns.
Yeah. And I mean, I hate to say it, but you start looking at all these tech bros, and the majority of them went through GATE, STEM, so on and so forth.
Exactly.
And I mean, GATE, STEM, all this, like 100%, like, the people over the curriculum for this, behind it all, is absolutely NSA CSS, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah. I mean, it's that's just what it is, and that's on record. Like, I mean, and obviously we need to train our people and stuff like this, but there is an astounding number of them programmed. An astounding number, and it's very sad. And you see things like, I was talking the other day, the Cybertruck explosion outside of, I think, Trump Tower, was it, or in Vegas, whatever.
Vegas.
That was a very good one because basically you had a record of what he was starting to whistleblow from, and then his plans changed, and then he ended up killing himself in front of the thing. Like, it really didn't line up. But if you see what happened to me, and I'm quite sure of this, people can make their own judgments, but if you see what his first story was, he was going to whistleblow, and then how it kind of morphed and added some layers to it, that was the gamma programming kicking in right there, right? And then when the gamma
sort of discredit him, right?
Exactly, because what happened was he had some real basic stuff at first, but then it started expounding into a different area and blowing up, and I believe that was gamma programming going off. And then when the gamma programming wouldn't stop, guess what? The omega kicked in, and it made sense for him to do whatever he was doing maybe in the moment, because unfortunately, if it kicks in, it can be very effective, and he was already in like a very ultimate state to where it's like, now it's just telling me like, hey, to get the attention, I have to do this, and this makes sense. I feel like it will because I know it will get on the news. And like, there's, you're having a flashback of your brain stimulated, and it's just like, and at this day and age, there can be remote stimulation as well to encourage that. But I mean, here's the thing is if you think that there's not like people with that level of technology that can keep an eye on this when under national security someone's whistleblowing about some stuff, right, to do with our classified activity, like, I mean, if you don't think they have their finger on the pulse of that, I don't know what to tell you. Like, come on now, No. I mean, it's just anyways.
The Matthew Libbelsberger, that's who you're talking about, that Green Beret thing, is so strange, because one of the strangest things that sticks out with that is the way that he killed himself. Because if knowing people who are special forces and the training that they've gone through, right, like, he could have made a much more effective bomb out of that Cybertruck than what he did. So to me, it makes me wonder just if some of this gamma programming that you're talking about that eventually evolved into omega programming has something to do with the inefficient way in which he killed himself, and maybe the more efficient ways that he would think to do that were sort of just obscured by what was going on in his mind. I don't know. I'm just trying to like kind of make sense of some of the things that don't make a lot of sense, because he could have turned that Cybertruck into a very powerful V-bed. Like, he had the knowledge and then didn't, So like people say like too, like, well, he did it in a very controlled fashion so he didn't hurt other people, which is why, he killed himself in that way. So there's all these like really, I don't know, odd things that stick out to me, know, and just kind of trying to understand and deepen my understanding of some of this programming and how the effects it has on people. But the other thing too that was kind of blowing my mind for a second is what you said about some of these phenomenon and these beings being physical, you know, like you said, you know, fallen angels, and you know, it's just the concept of something physical here being worshipped, and it's very strange. It makes me think back to like the whole conspiracy around like Valiant Thor. You familiar with Valiant Thor?
I'm lightly familiar.
Yeah, and like his presence and involvement in like the U.S. government as this you know, not what's the other word you use? Not fallen angel.
Nephilim.
Yeah, the Nephilim, like a Nephilim, so to speak, and or even from another planet or dimension, whatever, you know, is. But just kind of makes me wonder, like, these things, how much they've been manifesting themselves, you know, for a long time. And then there was like one of the former secretaries of defense or war. TJ, look this up for me, because the guy threw himself out of the window. Maybe you know who I'm talking about, Gray. He was another one too that was whistleblowing, and he look it up real quick before I keep yapping and ruin it. But he threw himself out of a window, and it was James Forrestal. I think that's who it was. Was that it, TJ? Look up Forrestal suicide, throw himself out of a window. Is that it?
Let me get back on here. James Vincent Forrestal.
Yeah.
He's cabinet level United States Secretary of the Navy.
Secretary of the Navy, yeah. He wasn't, please look it up. Correct me if I'm wrong. He was whistleblowing on something, but he basically got admitted to a psych ward and then threw himself out of a window. It was very suspicious the way he killed himself too. I'm just like running through.
Yeah, he went into psychiatric treatment after being exhausted from being overworked.
That was like the official story. There was more.
They worked on him quite a bit there, but basically he told the associates he had decided to resign, and then supposedly he was shattered when Truman abruptly asked for his resignation. So. Yeah, he was on the road to recovery, all that kind of fun stuff, and then
there's connections there with something else though. Like, try to find it.
There is.
Yeah. What is the like? Yeah. Either it's like the OSS or the development of something else that he was very much against. Help me out here.
Yeah, no worries. I'm digging into it here.
Are you familiar with this, Gray? The James Forrestal thing?
I feel like I've heard the name, but I'm not familiar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like that is he's been given a lot of credit. Like when what's his name? The dude who does like all the Stoicism books. He wrote about him and like his incredible work ethic, and you know that supposedly he was such a hard worker that he stressed himself out to the point where he gave himself a mental break and then threw himself out of a window. But there are people closest to him, so that made no sense, and some very suspicious things that he was. Basically talking about and was opposed to, and this is why, because his work ethic too was something they said that people were astonished at how well he managed the work ethic, because he was just like a nonstop person. So the fact that it became something that broke him was another element of why people were so surprised about it. Are you finding anything about what I'm getting at, TJ?
Not too much else. It's funny how much of it's been washed out. I mean, I've seen a multitude of videos about it. Basically, it does say that he was the first official whistleblower on UFOs.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. He was whistleblowing on UFOs. That's what he was in some of these programs. And I'm pretty sure that it was collection stuff that he was talking about. Maybe Majestic 12 stuff. I'm going to look this up now because I know I'm not full of shit, dude.
No, not at all, brother.
And I mean,
I'm kind of kicking
when it comes to this UFO stuff, I mean, if people were involved with it, 100%. Like, I mean,
the conspiracy was if he was pushed or if he jumped.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what it was. He was whistleblowing. So, I want to say it was on recovery projects that the U.S. government had for.
They said he jumped from the 13th floor of the Bethesda Naval Hospital in Maryland because he was being treated from depression. Mm-hmm. But several things leaped out to the examiners. First, there was a rope around his neck that wasn't long enough to allow him to reach the window from the radiator. What's more, there was no evidence the rope had ever been in contact with the radiator, so it's like he was jumping to commit suicide by hanging himself. And There was a guard on duty that evening, hadn't been to the facility before. He was brought in as a last-minute replacement. He gave a statement as the last person to see Forrestal alive. He discreetly disappeared back into anonymity. There were scratch marks discovered on a window ledge that looked like they were made by, resistance, like fingernail scratches, like somebody trying to keep from getting pushed out the window.
Yeah.
And then, a handful of UFO incidents he was supposed to be talking about Roswell and everything else. So
Right. That's it. That's what it was. That he basically was a whistleblower. That's what it just was reading on Google. Like the AI summary it gives you was that he was the first UFO whistleblower, basically, and that he was whistleblowing on some of the recovery efforts that the U.S. government was doing specifically after Roswell, and that's when he had his like psychotic break and then killed himself by throwing himself out of the window. But he was one of the secretaries of the Navy. That's what it was. I was like thinking about all these like really strange incidents, right, with people that it doesn't make a lot of sense, and that these things, and to your earlier stories about like from the previous episodes about all of these scientists coming back from to the United States through Project or Operation Paperclip, right? Like these people were and these processes were present by the time James Forrestal was the Secretary of the Navy, so it's feasible, I guess, chronologically to say that some of that programming could have made its way into to its involvement with him, I guess, is kind of what I'm getting at. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing is, and this isn't exclusive to America because, I mean, this is worldwide practice here. When you get to the top level in our military and our intelligence and all this, people have conditioning. They might not be absolutely full Manchurian candidate level, but there are certain conditioning that's set forth. I mean, this is just mandatory because we cannot just rely on people to keep the secrets. When it comes to our most sensitive secrets and stuff like that, like people have proven themselves to be untrustworthy. You put people through some of this trauma-based conditioning, even if it's just, with the transcranial magnetic stimulation, still it kicks in whenever certain parameters are crossed, and you just really compartmentalize that information. A lot of people that are live also really reflects it. You'll see people that are so different outside of their work and they're really into something different. It's just like there'll be really strict conditioning already that's passive, but this is just tied in, and especially when you're talking about getting into these UAP things and everything, because this all goes back historically to Department of Energy. Just like, again, 1995 ACHRE, where they're going through the child mind control victim, that was into the radiation experimentation. And that was radiation experimentation also connected to some of these advanced propulsion systems, some of these frequency devices, some of these microwave weapons, to see how that reacts on the body and so on and so forth. And, just going back to the Manhattan Project, this has been the condition that's applied, and they have been starting to apply this and eventually developed it into an industrialized scale to where we are churning out certain people. So
all right, let's take a break real fast and then we'll come right back.
All right,
literally. Cool. I just gotta take a leak. Apparently I'm old.
No, that's fine. I gotta take a leak too. I'll be right back.
Got you on that flow, Max, bro. It feels strange with you watching us, Chris. It's weird, man. You can hear me toxins. It's creeping me out, bro. It brings a whole new element to that cuck chair thing. Oh, dude, it's killing me. It's killing me. This has been a fun combo, man. Oh, shit. Oh, no. Oh, that's hilarious, dude. Holy shit.
Yeah, y'all got to be sick of listening to me talk. I'm tired today. I
Not
don't
at
know.
all, brother. We got
It's
that.
hard to talk about this shit. I'm like, God damn.
We always have goofy shit going on in the background, man. It's what keeps us all freaking level
Well, that's what's
to
up.
whatever degree possible, man.
Nice, nice.
We've always got some silly shit. We are a crew
Oh,
of total
man, I'd be doing the
retards.
same shit.
That's awesome, brother. But yeah, man, I'm always looking stuff up in the background, which is why my eyes are always all over the place that are pertinent. So that when we segment these kinds of things, if we put out, shorts and stuff like that, there's relevant articles, there's relevant pictures, videos, anything like that that correspond with different things that you're speaking of that either we may know of or not know of. And when I was coming across some of the different stuff that had to do with the GATE program, I kind of fell down this rabbit hole where it showed tests and like the different boxes that they used to put the headsets in and shit, man. And that brought back some really fucked up memories. Is all that shit is shit that I did.
Yeah.
And I kind of went, oh.
Oh, yeah.
And it got me lost there for a moment. I went, ooh.
Well, I'm definitely not sick of listening to you, and I'm ready to jump back in. I'm back from my break, but you said that there was some digital ways that this stuff was going on. Is this linked to like 5G?
Yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, I guess you want me to just hop in it?
Well, I mean, we can't. I mean, I'm in it. I'm here. I know you got this.
Yeah. So,
Psionic assets, all that stuff.
So, yeah. I mean, so we're going to, obviously, because, this is really going, again, starting with GATE, we're worried about, one, the nationwide network of sleepers, and we're also worried specifically about them deeply infiltrated within our military. The same people, going back to Malta, going back to the Dragon Society that churned out MKUltra, right? Also had their hands in this continuity of government, FEMA, all this. The same people that had their hands in the trafficking were through Oliver North and all this. Like this whole network, this is what they do. They built up this complete network, okay? And what happens is, historically, you've had your family, which are mostly believers, but you had your family, and they're keeping these key pieces of knowledge, and that knowledge is never hitting the government. They're intertwining the government, building up, these things, but then also, using it for cover, using it for funding to build up their network. And essentially they have built up their network inside our network, right? The globalist network is built inside America's network, and they have their little groups, and they have their people in key positions, okay? So when they've been building this up, here's one of the things is, we were talking about Monroe Institute and all this. So another thing that happened in the mid-'90s, because this all tried to go public in the mid-'90s, and it got tamped back down. But there was a lawsuit against the NSA for remote neural monitoring, okay? Remote neural monitoring. Now, if you go looking up the patents for Monroe, you'll notice that it's not just brainwave entrainment. They're actually, with binaural beats, right? To where it will say it's like, if you do 110 hertz here, 120 hertz here, the difference is 10. That's what your brain tunes to. That's kind of the simple way. No, what they were doing was they were sampling brain states. They were recording other people that would get in their own meditation, and they were sampling those brainwave states and mixing them together for people. So Monroe goes way back, okay? Lesser known is that Bob Monroe's mentor was Andrija Puharich, which is one of the mind control doctors you will see. That developed the original voice to skull type of shit. He had a dental implant that they would beam stuff to, and it would be hooked up to the nerve, and you would hear it, and then it goes eventually to wireless. Puharich was responsible for space, for basically indigo children, for space kids and all that. And he made the space camp to where the kids thought they had powers. The original channeling of the Nine and the raw material, all that was all started by Puharich. That was all Puharich sending people mental telepathy to build up these wireless systems, okay? So Puharich mentored Bob Monroe, who made the Gateway Voyage, who made the Monroe Institute. Bob Monroe's brother was James Monroe, who was in the Human Ecology Society. So that Human Ecology Society was an MKUltra cover. This is documented, and you can look this up. And Monroe, Bob and James are hooked up on the same on the census to the same address, right? Or is the census to Bob Monroe's dad is the same one as James, right? So that census linked up. So anyways, the thing about Monroe patents is essentially they had done the testing to see like the median frequency that I guess most people kind of like can end up synced at, right? Like to do the testing. Okay, so if we play this frequency, this many people get it. This one, this many people get it. More people seem to respond good to this, so on and so forth. So essentially, these were developed, and at some point in these hearing tests, right? What would happen is kids wouldn't only get hearing tests. There was some to where they would be brainwave entrainment. And what they were essentially doing was getting people's brain to entrain to a certain frequency that was tuned in, right? And if you get a brain trained to a certain frequency, it can actually get hooked up through EEG heterodyning, which is where you mix signals. You essentially mix their brain signal with like a flatline signal, and it can get hooked up to a computer system, okay, and establish a two-way connection, okay? And so this is called remote neural monitoring. So it doesn't necessarily mean, necessarily like depending on the technology, it wasn't always able to go real in depth, right? But the thing is that remote neural monitoring has been around for a long time, and essentially they could establish a two-way connection going way back with this. That was expounded upon in the Monroe Institute. And what they were doing was, some of these people that were getting this program, they would be put through this and essentially get their brainwave on this. And if they were a certain level of suggestible, if they were a certain level responsive to this, maybe not full psionic asset, right, but suggestible and all this, they would be able to still be able to loop into this, and then they can subconsciously feed them light suggestions, route them, route them, sway them, do this, Back as far as the 75, I think the Soviets were like blanketing our consulates with like 5 hertz, which is like, a depression, right? Stuff like that.
Damn.
Like, 10 hertz, they're known to play 10 hertz at like mega churches. No joke. They have frequency generators where put 10 hertz out, and it makes people more receptive. So they have things like this. So that passive stuff was already going. So like way back, tied in with talent, tied in with gate, some people would be identified and, they may try to route people, they may do stuff. Some people ended up getting placed on HCS, human control systems, humanless. And it's basically just like talent. If you're on talent, you're already on one. They just kind of will lightly monitor. Maybe they try to do stuff. Maybe they're in big testing programs to see frequencies and see how much they can adjust people, so on and so forth. But anyways, that technology continued to develop with Monroe, and that was a whole testing and breeding grounds there, testing to expound further continuously upon the work of Andrija Puharich. And essentially they were building up that wireless telepathy, and telepathy doesn't mean audible. It can be subaudible too, to where they just, some people think they get an NHI download and they just know. You see, well, it's actually, that is a patterned message, right? That is a patterned message. I'm not saying things can't happen, but for a matter of fact, they've been doing this. And it gets to the point to where Andrija Puharich had done some work with the people who channeled 9, the female, and like Carla Ruckert. And then I forget what the guy's name was. They went on to literally write a movie by themselves called Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which was where basically people pretending to be aliens were kidnapping them and programming them with rituals, okay? Okay, well, so like the people that were actually in Puharich's mind control fucking experiments for behavior modification wrote that themselves. You see what I'm saying? Like,
Jesus,
that makes no sense. What they were writing was what was in their subconscious from being programmed. Like, that's like the effective sickness of it. So anyways, that Monroe was building up, by the time 95 hit, Monroe was in full swing. They had the core-in helmets where they could do the helmet programming and all this, and they were kind of layering stuff off. They gave the testimony at the ACHRE, but that was just the manual methods, because by then it had already started to get moved off. Right now, we have finally reached the peak, okay? This time that we're in right now has been planned for a long time. This has always been on the globalist agenda, and this is the scariest point in history that we're at right now. And I'll explain why. Because one of the most resistant demographics are largely convinced that a white hat operation, or that people they perceive as good is kind of cleaning out some of these pedophiles, kind of cleaning up some of this mess, some of all this corruption and all this, right? And at the same time, we're starting to get answers about the UAP weirdness. Do we have advanced technology, so on and so forth? And we have some people that are publicly fighting for a disclosure, right? And we kind of just had like a bullshit, regime kicked out of here. We're cleaning up corruption left and right. There was kind of like sick stuff enabled, you know what I'm saying, in all this. So it's kind of like cleaning up, which is good. Don't get me wrong. But so here's what's been happening the whole time. Since this was all industrialized, since Oliver North started smuggling and the, crack epidemic happened and that network happened and they've been churning out these assets, all along they have been setting up continuity of government linked up to, for example, the Pentagon Secret Army. That's kind of at the high level that's on the books, but there's people everywhere. And what they have been doing is through the globalist, proxies, right? Through their clandestine services counterparts and people linked up with Malta and so on and so forth, they have been helping generate this. They've always held this certain occult information outside of the government. They've only had their people in the government and used these certain pieces. They don't actually have the, the decoding piece to actually fit this in and use this thing. And what happened is, they've routed a bunch of people in through National Guard and through other aspects to run these continuity of government drills, both at the official level and then also have, private people gathering in essentially sleeper cells everywhere. So what's been happening is, there's been, people say, okay, we're going to have our people, say we have the Dragon Societies, say we have the Jesuits. Right now, let's just say kind of the Jesuits we're in. Right before, a lot of these people were kind of more hooked up with these darker Dragon Societies, a little bit more occultic on its face, even though they all do it. There was still some Jesuits and all this still. Either way, the thing is that essentially it was always a plan to transition to this new system. Some people have called it the beast system, and there's actually credence to that because some of these supercomputers were called beast. Okay, and going to even Area 51, Groom Lake, in a facility called Dreamland, what has been known is that there was a computer, for example, called Big Bertha. Now, that was a beast system. And what these was, and you have that 95 lawsuit for the NSA for remote neural monitoring, the people that are behavioral modified, that were programmed, that were actually put through this, whether it be in gate or outside, but, or through these private institutions, they get hooked up to these HCS, this human control system lists, and they are literally hooked up remotely to a computer. It's hooked up to Talent Keyhole to where satellites are tracking, literally, and the grid is tracking these assets, and there is a whole force of these assets that are all literally tracked. When you go into special forces, 100% of them will have a variant of implants. If you put them in a Faraday cage, right, or an anechoic chamber, and then you burst a certain frequency at certain parts of their body, it can activate this. And what will happen is if you have a spectrum analyzer, you'll actually be able to see it will burst back a frequency. They're not always just transmitting. Nowadays, they actually have to have a certain frequency burst to them, and they will burst back, and then they burst in encrypted flashes and things like this. But this activity can actually be measured and is also linked up to NATO, okay? Through NATO, this is hooked up what's called, it's JADC2, which is now everything is getting carried over to basically all sensor, all data, everything is getting carried over to an artificial intelligence system that was just trying to get call for fire, right? Call for approval from Congress back in 2024. I'm not even sure how that turned out. This had been prototyped from what was Project Scorpion. Gates shut down Scorpion in like 2009 or something. That was Future Combat Systems, Future Soldier, and Scorpion, which was where all the NATO elements would get certain sensors to standardize in their vehicles. They were hooked up to a main control grid. Everything was hooked up, communicates with each other, so on and so forth. The people with the keys to this are tied up into these old orders, are tied up into all these families. Like, these people are not for America, they're not for anywhere, they are for their own globalist power. Okay, so these people, have constantly been trying to take power. Obviously, they try to get it, do they have their exact people in or not? Well, the thing is that, there's always been this switch they can throw. Say, like, if they get discovered and, like, basically they're going to get, hung as traitors or whatever. Like if it really gets pressed up on some of these people, they have this, they can throw the switch and they can activate their sleepers and they can start activating their sleepers to do things. So this Dragon Societies and these Jesuits, right? They have intertwined everywhere. Because there's different parts that do different things for churning out these assets. Everybody's been intertwined. It's a lot of espionage, counter-espionage, and double agents. But these are the two groups that hold the occult knowledge to activate these sleeper assets, that understand it and control the behavioral modification programs that are tied in with everything. So it's kind of been a Mexican standoff for them behind the scenes, because if it starts getting messy, it's really going to get messy. They work together to an extent to control the people, but they infight over those levers of control. What's happening now has been planned for a long time, and it is a technological coup. Okay? Now, they are burning some of these people that have done these manual ways, right? Some of these believers, some of these people that are doing this, and they've presented just a bare minimum of it. Because still, everybody's families are intertwined. This is a whole mess. These people, these, elite, these socialites, it's all families are all intermingled. And you'll start seeing that if you dig into anybody. These people all come from the stuff. Even people you think who weren't involved, these people are all deep weaved in generationally. And what's been happening is the infrastructure has been getting built up to the point to where it's actually, effective, and it has, been tried and tested. After Project Scorpion, it was pretty clear they had it good and everything started getting implemented. And again, now we're at, JADC2, which is, which is like the Joint All Domain Control System, and this is all hooked up to artificial intelligence sensors. People are hooked up to compartmentalized aspects of this as well, too. So what's been happening is, there is still these people want to run the whole world, and essentially they want a coup. If they just can get people to hand over the keys, even better. They don't want to have to force it and fight for it. They want people to essentially submit, and they want to have slaves. They want two classes, them, the ruling class, and then everybody else working in an organized fashion. They'd rather have people happy and working together than forcing people, right, and do this. That's what they're looking for. So essentially, as all this infrastructure got built up, it got to the point to where, say, if they don't have to, they're not going to activate everybody, because why would they? But if shit really hits the fan, they have people everywhere and can start activating them. Again, Mexican standoff between them, but why are they going to do it for the people? The other aspect of this is, like I was saying, if they do activate people, there's the ideology aspect of it. If these people get activated and go to this personality, are they going to go through with the plan? Well, it would have to look like they could successfully actually run the world with who they know they work with in the network, like they've been brainwashed. But if, say these sleeper assets that are hooked up with continuity of government, if they just got activated and there wasn't already a natural disaster or we weren't already invaded, they might be like, well, what the fuck? This isn't going to work, and might go against it more, right? So, if there was, say, a huge natural disaster, if they flood in people from the south and there starts being terrorist attacks, if there is a civil war, well, they can flip that switch and activate all these sleepers everywhere. And amidst the chaos, it would probably be in these people's best interest knowing to serve the globalist powers, right? Whether they're a believer or not a believer is irrelevant. It's, the fact of the matter is what they're involved with, and they'll already have been through it. So, if something extreme happens like that, there's been kind of steps to kind of tease that and feel it out and see how it will go. But they don't want to flip that switch unless if it's assured success. Because if you flip that switch, it's going to cause utter chaos, mess up, and then, you don't want, if it's not successful, you're screwed. So they've been slowly trying to build it up, slowly trying to build that up, slowly try to build it up. They'd really have to get forced in a corner to activate that, right? But so it got to the part now to where, it's so, are they going to have to activate that or not? Well, we're getting right here to the point, and it's a very scary place, because what they decided to do was, okay, we're sticking with the plan to just do this in the passive way. And right now, basically, they are faking, because some of this is also coming out. You have to understand, it's a race right now. It's a window. It's a transition, okay? they don't have to activate worldwide sleepers to basically go off and cause mayhem and attack critical infrastructure and round up people and all this. And they can't actually, because to do this, they have to activate continuity of government and to go in with that. If that doesn't happen, if they just activate their sleepers, right, you have to understand, like for terrorist attacks, well, that's going to go hand in hand and might actually activate continuity of government, like just depending what happens, right? So it kind of goes hand in hand. But so what's happening right now is, since this is set up so well and they actually set up their infrastructure and are succeeding, but some things have been coming out, and like things are getting discovered, okay, the push for Epstein. The first time around, remember, they gave him a sweetheart deal. They kind of brushed it under the rug. People were still messing with Epstein, right? This time this happened. They got rid of him. Diddy's coming out. They're clamping down on that. But
they let Epstein off quite a few times.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was bad. But so whatever happened with this time, then Diddy's coming along. He's got that case going. There's a lot going behind the scenes, Hollywood, this and that. The stuff's getting exposed. We have a new administration in, less doing the weird stuff with our kids, all this. Like, it seems like it's good progress, right? But at the same time, what's being set up is they're ready to completely switch over this system, and they need people to go along with it for this window, because this is a critical window that they get things carried over to this new system that is basically fully wireless and just as, if not more effective, and at the same time, like undetectable. They're not having to do these manual methods as much. So the technocrats in here saw their basic opportunity once the infrastructure was laid out to essentially enact their coup, right, without doing a whole continuity government, without a mass activation of sleeper assets. So what's going on is there's a man named Christopher Kit Green, and that's a CIA doctor that also mentored under Andrea Puharich. Okay, and that was the mind control doctor. Christopher Kit Green is a mind control doctor. Publicly, he's known as the guy who essentially has done all the brain imaging on people that have had UFO incidents and incidents with that sort of thing. If they get damaged, they go to him. They get a workup. He logs them as trying to learn about UFOs and NHI. In reality, that's called reclamation or closeout. Everybody, almost everybody, or actually everybody, if they're in military service, 100% of these people that have went through these, unless if it's just a really random thing where they came in contact with something they shouldn't have seen, these people are subjects to behavior modification programs. And, if they run into something, they see something in the field, this or that, you understand, they come in, they get debriefed. They see, okay, is this person spilling secrets? Are they going to talk about this? Do they know it's classified technology? Do they know it's this? Do they know that? Even if it's something real, even if they had some contact with something out there. He gets them in, gets them in the brain scan, does the workup, has a complete workup, and then they can manipulate them through there, if they need to update gamma, if they need to update omega, so on and so forth. That would be reclaiming. They keep on using them, they can contain them, keep on going. If it's not working, well, what they might do is they might do something to covertly damage their brain even more, make it worse, right? Essentially to where their memory's messed up and they're unreliable, and then they can't whistleblow, things like this. But so he's been a containment person, and also tests all these weapons under the exotic umbrella. It's essentially this technology tradecraft, whether it be this frequency microwave tech, this behavioral modification tech, or the advanced propulsion and exotic physics. This is all under the same umbrella, just like the Manhattan Project that gets the strict conditioning. Everybody involved is under behavioral modification. It's national security. We're talking about weapons of mass level, technology that we're dealing with, and it is what it is. So, he's one of the foremost doctors that kind of is like handling in this situation and just keeping the house clean, right? So what he did was a study at Skinwalker Ranch. Okay, it's called the Skinwalker Ranch Interference Syndrome Study. And Skinwalker Ranch, contrary to popular belief, is actually an exotic weapons testing ground, okay, where they're testing a lot of this here of man-made technology. And what he did with this study was he developed these ICD-10 codes, which is medical insurance codes to treat Havana syndrome and to treat anomalous health incidents, which is essentially, what people get in contact with UAP. And Skinwalker Ranch has been presented to the public under the guise of actually being actually being like NHI, like unknown phenomena. And that's crucial because they have established that NHI, plausible deniability. So what they can do is basically that's the grounds of that they made the ICD-10 codes on for treating all these different health effects. That has already been done. So they created these ICD-10 codes because for this planned technology rollout, to where they are basically flipping the switch on the newest, biggest systems that were made, such as at the new NASIC facility, okay? Who I think, what is it, David Beck managed, BEK. But these different facilities like this that suck up a shit ton of power and have been around, just like the facility at Groom Lake that had Big Bertha, right? That was the Beast computer system that was hooked up where these people, they basically they have a programmed interface called Beast, and that's what interfaces with the Beast system with the remote neural monitoring. It's just like a electronic handshake, right? And essentially, we're talking about wide-scale behavioral modification, remote technology being upscaled and really, utilized to a heavy effect. And what they know that there's going to be an increased adverse health effects, biological damage. They have it gridded up, stuff coming from satellite. They got stuff coming from the towers, stuff bouncing off devices. The technology is unfathomably, ridiculously, effective, and it's frightening. So this isn't, though, just for this. Like, they've also been developing these vehicles. They've been developing these fucking flying toys, right, for a long time. Got them in drones. They have, ones people want to zip around in. The billionaires, right, the families that have all this money and stuff, they want to use their fancy technology that they have developed. And they also want to have basically all-seeing surveillance and control of the population. So what they've been doing is they already established the ICD-10 codes, and now they have these fake whistleblowers, and not just fake whistleblowers, I'm sorry. They have PR men who say they're PR men, say they work for the government, right, and are telling us basically some of this. They're leaving it up, plausible deniability to the government, for, a lot of this bad stuff that's going on and telling a certain story. And they're getting ready to essentially usher in this new technology. You have the UAP Whistleblower Act, right? They're trying to do this that basically has a Truth and Reconciliation Act, right? But the same people, like, they're presenting to the people like, hey, this dirty stuff's getting cleaned out, right? We're getting rid of some of these people who are doing this. We're trying to get some transparency, but some of the guys, we need to offer whistleblower exemption because some of these people, blah, 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 blah. The whole plan is for the people that have perpetrated all this and basically got rich off the manual torture methods to fucking children for mind control. That was the slave labor force eventually because they were brainwashed and then used in these programs, right? These people are having the ability to come forward and be excused for their crimes, right? And then essentially, can come forward and present themselves as hero if they want, or just, bring this forward, roll forward this tech that has been developed, and essentially, have a free pass to do so. The problem with it, though, is that the behavioral modification has never been addressed, and this is the number one thing. And regardless of what people may think of me explaining this, get talking to absolutely anybody in this. They're either going to shut down and not talk about it, right, or maybe they will talk about it. But the thing is you dig into every one of these figures that is involved directly with a UAP disclosure. These people have been through behavior modification, or they are just a complete stooge, okay? And the issue here is that the same people are going to be in control of this new technology. It's not even about them getting a pass for the old shit. It's about them still being in control and this technology having developed to this state. So essentially, this is a planned rollover to rolling out this new technology. They've been using AI, and they've essentially been using these Tech Bros network to basically have a soft coup within their own little power structure. Some of these ways of old, they're cleaning it up, presenting just a bare minimum to the public and cleaning up the whole situation, whitewashing it, right? But then are rolling out the new tech and will still have the same overlying control. A huge part of this is with the UAP and everything. You see, you have Greer speaking out, you have Colt Hart speaking out, you have Barber and Skywatcher speaking out, and they have been the first ones to really, on the large level, talk about certain aspects of this. And what they have mentioned is psionic assets, right? And summoning these craft, psionic assets, and they have mentioned Gate as well, and they're calling for whistleblowers. Okay, you have Greer calling for whistleblowers. You have all these people, right? You have Barber and them recruiting, even recruiting for Skywatcher. So here is the problem, because this has long been planned for this crossover, and what they're doing is, over time, there are certain schedules. Some of these people that were programmed, right? They may have to get what's tuned up. You just don't ever touch. Even if you're not active and you went into active operations, you're more reserved, right? A sleeper. So some of these people aren't actually in the full military, right? Like that. Like some of these people are just all throughout life because you have the sleeper force. Well, periodically there may have to be very occasional checkups. These people are managed, essentially fleet managed. This is so compartmentalized that over time, sometimes the limited oversight in these handlers that handles large swaths of people, for example, in like a certain FEMA region or so on and so forth, they can pass and not pass off their whole list and not pass off their whole fleet managing information, right? So you have what's called loose assets. Then you have people that just for whatever reason, programming didn't stay anchored in because, programming is not perfect. Sometimes people break out of it. Everybody can't get managed so close to that, to that level to where it's 100%, taken care of all the time. Sometimes things bleed through. Sometimes people need maintenance. So there's loose assets, and then there's also assets that are unaware out there, right? So what's happening is as this is all getting transferred to the new system, they have to see it like, hey, who's talking? Who's going to say too much? Who knows too much? Who still has information leading back to the old era where we're doing these manual methods to where this information is really prosecutable, right? To where, they had to come in person to get this done. It wasn't fully remote. And like this can actually lead back to people. So what they have been doing is, you hear they mention psionic assets, and like I don't know how much you've heard, but they have presented it in a way that's like, oh, these people choose to do this, they're taken care of. Yeah, they might come from third world countries or from like the Bureau of Indian Affairs, but they're happy and they're taken care of. 100%. If they're a psionic asset for the government and were involved in this program in any capacity, they went through the behavioral modification training and they have gamma and they have omega. Okay. I know multiple people on Barber's team and have spoken with them, and they have confirmed, for example, and people need to push back and challenge on this, that 100% of them have been programmed. Some of them have been self-aware, but that they have not overcame programming. And if people remember how I came through this in my story, there is layers. You become aware, but you still may have underlying access. It doesn't just automatically heal it. There is still activation triggers underneath that can go. Okay. And there is a tiered process of getting out of this. So here's the problem is, you have people calling for all whistleblowers. You have people mentioning Gate. You have people mentioning psionic asset. And it has created a rush of people announcing publicly and people contacting these channels privately. These channels are monitored. Obviously, Barber himself had even admitted to essentially doing a net operation using Greer's channel to vet incoming whistleblowers looking for HVTs to stop them from disclosing unauthorized public information that his employer didn't want. He decided to whistleblow whenever he went to Greer's conference and heard Michael Herrera's story, who coincidentally was the only person that was disclosing the trafficking element. Since then, Barber has whitewashed the trafficking element. So essentially, people have got the idea that, oh no, people aren't trafficked. They choose to come and they get taken care of, and they get a part of this program, and has called for them to speak up. So these people that are announcing themselves like, oh, hey, I had this happen. Oh, hey, I was involved with this, or contacting these private channels, they are getting themselves flagged, okay? These channels are monitored. waiting for people to say this through the journalists involved, through Barber and that team involved, and also obviously social media and online's monitored. If people announce themselves or do certain codes, and through these people, they all have this subconscious programming because they were essentially, conditioned with certain imagery, there's something called report programming. So what's actually going on is through the information they have disseminated, people have been passively triggered to what's called report. That's also part of base programming, but essentially all report is giving certain information about themselves that a handler can use in order to loop them in, either reclaim them or close them out. And what's going on now is there is a massive cleanup operation. They are cleaning house. Either they can contain assets, they can suppress them, they can control them, they can get them back on the roster, they can keep them, they can carry them over to this new system of control, which is, almost exclusively, completely done through AI and through remote neural monitoring feedback loops, as opposed through actual manual handling and things like this. So they're crossing people over that, or if they cannot contain them, they're closing them out. So people are getting flagged in mass. And then what happens there is they get individually assessed, okay, very quickly, just like Skynet was going through cell phone data of these terrorists and so on and so forth, right? And seeing who's switching cars, seeing what they're talking about. Someone speaks up, they get all their devices flagged, it goes through, they see what these people are speaking about. Are they disclosing something that presents a threat level? And if they do, next things will be initiated. Perhaps they didn't say enough to trigger their own gamma programming or their own omega programming. These things can also be externally activated. So what's happening in mass now is there's a massive cleanup and closeout operation going on. And the way things have been announced is that they have been announced to encourage people and literally triggered people to report on themselves, triggered people to announce themselves and contact these private channels. Okay? These people, there are 2 on Barber's team. The only reason that they're there is because they survived Omega programming due to a misfire. And you say, so what, 2 people, from a misfire? Yeah, imagine all the ones that didn't make it that far that tried to, but it didn't misfire. And that's a very sick reality. And if you're plugged in with these channels where all these people end up, because not all of them, but a lot of them end up going through trauma therapy, going to a therapist, might not even be for trauma therapy, but a certain percentage go to therapy, eventually already know or eventually find out that they went through something and start proceeding in trauma therapy, find a specialist, and then, start getting safe help and come out of this, right? But when you're linked up with these networks and you hear basically from all the people and you're hooked up with these survivor groups, because there's plenty of them, you start seeing what's happening, and bad things are happening, and people are falling out of the loop. And people are going, and contacting these channels, and people are being retaliated on. We had sent out feelers just working with a network of survivors to see like what happens here and there. And there are several people that have been retaliated on. We've even had, unfortunately, someone pass. And that's aside from Omega programming. So what's happening is instead of announcing that, hey, if you may have been involved with some psionic testing, development and research or exploitation, or you think you were involved with one of these programs for any reason, we highly recommend to protect your privacy while you become educated about a few pertinent aspects, because the same perpetrators that were running these programs may be looking to target you now, and then connect them with some very basic information of what you might expect. So I have explained Omega programming to where, like, obviously there's a deeper aspect, but the thing is, like, it's generally, unfortunately, like a strong rush of feelings and like thoughts, which, like, don't get me wrong, coincides with reality. Like, so if you know to expect it, and you basically say, hey, like, you were through this, you have missing time, you were tested for psionics, and you kind of remember some weird MKULTRA stuff, just get ready, because what might kick up is you might start getting waves of horrible feelings, because unfortunately there's something called Omega programming. They try to get people to get rid of themselves before they can, help seek justice. It's like, so just be ready.
Imposed impending doom.
Yeah, so just be ready that you might feel a horrible wave of emotions, and just ride it like a roller coaster. Don't project it onto your current life. Don't do anything, We got your back. There's other people out like this. Yes, this is a thing. You're not crazy. You're good. Just be ready, just in case if some shit kicks up. Just watch yourself. Be careful. That little warning alone would save countless lives. There are people dying in mass right now. And this might seem weird, or, I know it's not like right in people's face, but like this is happening at epidemic levels. And all that needed to happen was responsible announcement. The people that are directly involved with disclosure right now all are directly linked, these perpetrating parties. It is what it is. Like, you have the demonstration that was done, and I'm not saying that Ross Coulthart and Barber know this. I believe that they're being used unwitting. But when they mentioned Salem, and that is where that they had done this demonstration of the psionic asset, that is a place that is historically known for MKUltra. And this is one of the places that has this new tech on site. The tech that was developed in conjunction with Monroe Institute and from Puharich and, from this behavioral modification program. All they have to do now is the people that aren't getting closed out because they're talking too much, they get invited to passively get into this activity, okay? And what happens is you go to East Salem, you go on the premises where they have some of these towers, or they have some of this behavioral modification equipment that streamline transmits, and what happens is they just have to get open into an open, suggestible state and clear their mind, and people are thinking about contact, and what happens is remotely, they get their temporal lobes stimulated. They get their Wernicke's area stimulated, just like used to happen directly with the helmet. They might have a vision and experience phenomena. They might not, but they might have that vision. They might just feel something. They might see a little light. They can make this external. They are absolutely synthesizing this, and it goes back. It's been documented that they can do these things. They even have programmable plasma. They can do all sorts of things. And what will happen is that while people are encouraging this contact, they will have their temporal lobe stimulated, perhaps have phenomena, and they will be getting a pattern message to their subconscious, and they will get their programming updated, and they will be what's called reclaimed in the loop, and they won't go outside the bounds. They might all of a sudden have a certain shift and seem like a positive person. These things can happen naturally, but what's happening is in masses, they are crossing over to this new wireless tech. And that's what's going on. And it happens at places like East Salem. It happens at places like Monroe Institute. And these people that are involved with this in the past and are looking for answers are flooding to these places and flooding with these groups in mass. And again, they're announcing themselves. They're contacting compromised channels. They're getting flagged. Everybody's getting assessed. Either we can get them in an area, we can shut them up. We can program them more in this suggestible state with this remote technology, or we're going to close them out. And how that happens is, unfortunately, through activating omega programming, activating gamma programming, activating omega. And if people get past the omega programming and are still talking, and still to move with closeout, what they end up doing is higher pulse directed microwave energy and giving these people anomalous health incidents. In best case is like, giving them, traumatic brain injury and severely damaging them. And this is happening as we speak in mass. As it's crossing over. Before they roll out this new stuff, before they roll out this new technology, Foley, what they are doing is they're making sure that they're shut up everybody that can't be under the thumb. And this is just a massive programming. And I know we're getting here on time, but the last thing is we have been tipped off to false flags that are being planned.
What are these false flags?
These false flags, they're twofold. One is on the upcoming CE5 cruise of Greer. This is the first cruise ever. They take advantage of certain maritime stuff anyways. This is known in the programming world, but we had been advised that they're planning a false flag having to do with the people that are doing like this huge CE5 event. Now we haven't been told that it's, that like it's a false flag like they're going to bomb them or anything, but they're supposed to be in an event. We don't know what's getting fed to the subconscious. This isn't planned until April. Hopefully this doesn't happen. There's others that have reported this, including, to the second in command of one of these agencies. We have been pushing this because they're planning to do that on Greer's cruise, and then at the same time through the Skywatcher event. Right now it's planned for March through May. April's right in the middle here. What they're planning to do with that is they've been trying to summon one of these things and basically get the recording and all that, and they have it tied in with AARO. There is supposed to be a false flag there where people are damaged. There has already been an incident.
Like hurt by non-human intelligence people.
Supposedly by non-human intelligence, but it will not be non-human intelligence. What they have is their psionic asset is hooked up to some of the domestic equipment, because this is what they do. They end up having these people interface, with these things. And yes, they're supposed to do a false flag to where people are getting damaged, like from radiation, whatever it is. And this is looking to pass legislation to restrict third-party activity for this, and then possibly form a registry as well, which these people are already registered on HCS lists, but for these psionic assets like reclaimed from these programs. So yeah, what we've been told is that the whole thing is Barber, Greer, everybody involved with this right now. Nobody's talking about behavior modification. They know it exists. They know they're dealing with the assets, but they refuse to even give simple warnings publicly or behind the scenes, and people are dying from this. People are getting retaliated on. People are getting scooped up. All they have to do is make simple warnings and simple advisements to give people a chance, but for whatever their reason, they're not. They're being used to bait and trigger assets into announcing themselves, into being reclaimed or closed out. And at the same time, what they're being used for is to whitewash it, while they're passing the UAP legislation to allow exoneration for the people that have been involved with the crimes against humanity for this. And that's what they're doing in this window as they roll it over. These people, unfortunately, are programmed themselves. I'm plugged in with the camp hard. It's 100% fact. People need to press them about this. I don't believe Jake will deny it. You talk to his psionic assets, they won't deny it either, or they'll have missing memory. These people are playing with fire, and they are being used against the rest of everybody. And, what happens is if they do one of these summoning events and then, say 10 people in the vicinity die from radiation poisoning, or the whole crowd, which I believe is going to be 50 to 100, that's sufficient to pass legislation easily that everybody would get behind, so that random people can't do this stuff, because this is now a possibility in our day and age. The ICD-10 codes have already been set up with the plausible deniability Skinwalker Ranch heading to this NHI, kind of is built on that shaky ground. And this is the fucking plan. There's people on Jake's own team that have reported this. Unfortunately, this is in deep to where 100% of these people are mind control. I don't like saying this, but this is literally, they are using people against the rest of everybody. And these people don't know what they're doing. It is a shit show. And, unfortunately, bad things are on the horizon, and they're only feeding into it. There's very simple things. It wouldn't hurt them to play this a different way, to make these advisements. People in their own camp think they should. So essentially, it's a very dangerous situation, yes, and they're scooping up everybody. So that is what it is. But yeah, so we have imminent false flags for this, and it's the type of thing that these people have even been warning, or Greer and them have been warning about, but they're stepping right into it, feeding right into it. And it goes so much deeper to where these people have been setting up whistleblowers plenty of ways that are verified on the record, leaking information, everything. It's a complete shit show. But no, we're in a real dangerous place, because we're just a stone's throw away from there being a serious event, from them playing with psionic assets, knowing they're programmed, having no idea about programming or how it works. They're dealing with weaponized psyches when they don't know what they're doing, and they are, baiting all of the other programmed people out there. There is tons of people that weren't even all the way successfully programmed, but have the base programming, because that's always first. But then if that can't get built on, discarded. They just let them roam. They don't necessarily do it to that. But if they have to and they start remembering, they get activated. And this is happening in mass. It's horrible. So that's the real warning, and I start talking about it, it's I should have talked about this first. I have online too, but this is the danger. This is the dangerous time that we're living in. And, people need to start putting some pressure and start asking the authorities, the headliners in this space, demanding they talk about behavioral modification, demanding that they, at least provide the people involved with the chance, send them to the community, send them to resources, educate them. It's a bad place. And I hate to say it, but it's because the people involved are being taken care of enough. And they, unfortunately, are being stimulated in ways to where they see themselves as the good guys and they see the good from this. But they are blindsided and being manipulated actively to create a dangerous environment for the rest of us where the criminals get exonerated and still have the levers of control, only bigger and better. So, that's where we're at, and it's terrifying.
My last question for you would be if this plan goes off, without a hitch and it works out exactly the way they want it to, what is the end goal? What is the end result?
So the end goal is essentially, stricter legislation gets passed, basically, I'm sure signing over some surveillance rights, stuff like this, restricting activity for other people. What goes off without a hitch is that, the UAP disclosure fund or whatever exonerates all the criminals. They come forward. All the new tech rolls out publicly that we're putting out, probably saying that it was, in response to what's going on and we just made it as opposed to that we've been making it. But they roll out the new tech and they literally have these behavioral modification machines now that it is at such a state. They're getting ready to flip these on, and the adverse health effects, again, they're playing this off, plausible deniability, to unknown forces and maybe some of this new tech. But we're talking about behavioral modification, remotely being used at large on the populace. It's already been tested on the populace at large, but we're talking about it's terrifying. We're talking about you can't even fathom. We're talking about they have the ability to link up every single person onto a grid through the internet of bio things and all this, and linking up people as a serial number to where they can send electrical impulses to these people and literally hack their brain. And it's got to the point where they can do this so sophisticated remotely without all of this manual process, without all this from birth, without all of this. It is at a terrifying level. So they're about to exonerate themselves, the same people running this program, and once they get in that state and they're safe, that's what a lot of these people want to do, to get solid legal basis to stand on and to be able to roll out some of this tech and, then to use it even wider scale. And this sort of thing is already being used as well. So it's really terrifying. But what happens with the false flags is a good chance people are going to die. I don't know exactly what's going to happen with the false flags. I don't have that information. But it's 100% that Barbara's team with the Skywatcher event coming up and the CE5 crews were absolutely on the table for a false flag event, and that was planned, and they were building up to it. And this is part of the transition that they're looking for, because they need to stop third parties from doing this activity, because at the same time that can expose activity and interfere with theirs. They need to exonerate some of themselves and get the ground to stand on, and especially if we play as there's an alien threat with they've already been talking up, about, they're pissed we're shooting down their ships, they're this, that, this, it gives plausible deniability. You hear about Operation Northwoods, right? Where we were going to fake a terrorist, we were going to actually have a real event and then blame it on Cuba. Well, what better than aliens? Because the aliens aren't just going to come out and say, hey, no, it wasn't us. So it's plausible deniability, but it's even better. And then that can also give the public a harder sell. If they actually say at the summoning event, have a false flag and pretend that actually there was an NHI event that was a deliberate attack and response or so on and so forth, they could use that even to mirror something to justify a lot, whether it's a new type of Patriot Act, whatever it is, and then more things, because then from then on out, anything that comes up, they can also, again, attribute to, hey, well, we have hostile forces because these people were messing around. So, the legislation's passed, the people can't do it, blame it on the alien forces. Then you have these different sectors, because in a lot of these governments, unfortunately, these globalists are in all these different governments. So then it can also kind of been give them a reason to step up and unite together under kind of a, kind of a continuity of government, but kind of passive, thing to where they consolidate the power structure into a New World Order, one world nation, because that is what this is going for. That is what these people want. They want a global coup, whether it's through activating sleeper assets if they're forced in a corner, or whether it's through, basically subterfuge, dissolving the borders one at a time, having a technocratic coup and having everything transferred over to AI instead of the blackmail rank and file. It's just a full transfer over to the new technology system, just on every front.
No, you know what's crazy is I know somebody who's been talking about this for a very long time, probably since, 20 years, and that this was coming eventually, that the best way for unification is to have some sort of alien threat because it's a threat to the planet. And that is the broadest unifying banner that you can come up with, because it's a danger to literally everybody to give somebody control, or a small group of people control over everyone, and have rules that govern everybody, I asked you what the end of the
causes global unity, because we have one unified enemy at that point in time.
Exactly, a unified enemy. Yep, and that's why I asked you what you thought it was, because that, to me, like listening to all of this and just thinking about it, is exactly what I think the end result goal here is to have that unifying enemy, that unifying banner, to basically unify everybody against a common enemy and have that one world government, basically.
For sure, and and it's just vital too that people understand that, like, the number one theme, because these mind control go on different themes, is the alien UFO theme. This is what people are programmed for. If you dig into these programs, you see more and more and more and more. And the information has been out there for a long time. It's scary. It doesn't get out there as much. There's enough to show people. Show them Dr. Colin Ross, right? It's Bluebird, Deliberate Creation of Multiple Personality by Psychiatrists. Mm-hmm. It was remade as CIA Doctors. Mm-hmm. You have that. You have Walter Bowart's Operation Mind Control, Researchers Edition, that. Martin Cannon, The Controllers, that. You have the 1995 ACHRE, that. It's indisputable that, hooked up with the Department of Energy, hooked up with all this, they were using mind-controlled assets. It's indisputable that they were also faking abductions, and that this was a theme, and that this is well known in the dissociative trauma therapists and the International Science and Study of Trauma and Dissociation. There's interest groups, right? There's signature interest groups, and this is well known. So, like, what people need to do is demand from the headliners, from the journalists, from everything, hey, the operational personnel in these programs are mind controlled. Are you not going to talk about that? Like, how do you know that dude's not mind controlled? I know that might sound extreme, but the documentation's there. Like, I can sound as stupid and as scrambled as I want about this. It's not going to change the documentation. If you go look, it's there. The blindly corroborating evidence from nationwide people that don't know each other, same program names come up, same methods, same this and that. Like, this is a well-known fact. And I want people to know that if you get up there into those elite circles and those socialites, and you get talking to these people, you're going to find an extra high concentration of some of these weird abduction events and stuff. Is it just that aliens just like these certain people in these certain areas? No, it's an organized behavioral modification program. And people just need to start asking the right questions, demanding. If people are headlining in the space and they're not talking about it, they're compromised. Either they're inept or they're controlled. Period. There is no reason that any intelligent person does not know about the behavioral modification mind control, because the information is out there and it's heavily involved. And if you press any of these people, some stuff can come out. You'll hear, oh, they know some. Well, it's when you have Omega programming and people kill themselves, when you have a journalist who knows the psionic asset, and you have other people that know psionic assets and know their story, that they survived Omega programming, they have common sense. They know other people have Omega programming too. What are you doing? You're playing with people's lives. Why? For your vested interests. So it goes from no matter what, how inept they are. They know people are programmed. You have people out there that are worried about a story, that are worried about the status quo, that are worried about, their retirement. They're worried about this, and I get it. But it's not any one person. It's about us all, and you're not going to sell us all out. And I'll be damned. And I hate pointing the finger at people and doing all this, but we know we have some real disgusting people out here that have mishandled witnesses, that we've sent several witnesses through to the same journalists to see how they act with different stories, see how they're acting with things. You know, we've had people retaliated on, information leaked, right? We have people in these camps, like, you know, we know each other as the survivors, you know, we all know each other, you know, and some of these cyanic assets are linked up in different things. Like there's frequency grids and things that people don't need to know about on here. But like, you know, we talk. What are y'all doing out there? That's my question for them. What are y'all doing? You know,
what are
you're
some
allowing
of these,
people to die.
Who are some of these journalists you're talking about?
Ross Goldhart.
Yeah. Okay.
Ross Goldhart, Jeremy Corbell.
That's what,
you know,
that was somebody else I was wondering about was Corbell. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, and it's unfortunate to say this, but those are the two. I've posted some information online just showing like where I daddled with a little conversation with them, and I never base anything off me because like I'm an asshole, right? But that being said, like enough to get hooked up through them, through some you know, sort of through some Armed Forces Committee staffer, and then they listen to what I say. Ross Coulthart's, you know, trying to get back with me months later when I've been talking about this exact information that they come out with. And guess what? I directly had warned him about dealing with sensitive with witnesses because, you know, we have this organized safety is a blindly corroborating database where we have all these witnesses. I shared some stuff from some Raytheon subsidiary BEAE and stuff like that. People's own families saying, hey, you know, self-admitted Luciferian. Hey, you know, this person, you know, some stuff, you know, with his own family, you know, stuff like that, like serious stuff, safe house, you know, stuff like this, like shared some information, you know, is setting deadlines, blowing past it, like isn't, you know, wants to talk to witnesses, isn't willing to be sensitive, like isn't listening about Omega program, doesn't care about this, knows it's real, but like it's just ridiculous. On top of that, multiple people got retaliated on. I've posted this information. It is
I
what
know.
it
Your
is.
ex
These
is
people
fantastic.
these people are wildly unethical. They are costing people's lives and for no fucking reason. So like, I don't know what the fuck the deal is, but you know, the people that they even represent and deal with are advising against them. I don't know what these people are dealing with, Stockholm syndrome or what, but you know, we're about to really start showing it because like what's going on is unacceptable, and you know, we might just start showing the whole conversations and really pushing. But I mean, these people, I'll be honest, like some of these people that know they're dealing with programmed assets, know Omega programming's real, and have been like wildly mishandling witnesses. Like you're coming up on criminal negligence when there's a pattern of people being hurt after they talk to you. You're coming up on criminal negligence, and people are documenting or looking to pursue that. And so, I mean, it is what it is, but it is disgusting. People, you know, have been dying over this, and you know, lots of people have been retaliated on. There's no encouraging of discretion. There's no encouraging of operational security. There's no education. There's no chances to give anybody a fighting chance, either publicly or privately, when they know what they're dealing with. And, you know, when they know the people they're talking to have, you know, narrowly survived Omega programming. So I just don't understand how people can even operate like that. It's insane, wildly unethical. And I mean, you know, these people are going to have to face justice sooner or later for this. What do we think that behavioral modification isn't going to come out publicly? And then it's going to be known how you were handling assets when you knew all along, and that you were being quiet about child crimes. Who are you?
Yeah,
you know, these people are sick. These fucking people are sick. They're fucked
people,
up.
man.
For sure.
They're fucked up. Yeah. It's real bad. It's real bad.
Dude, God, this is like so much fucking shit. Like, first off, kudos to you for how well you articulate this stuff, because we actually were talking offline before about how well you can articulate this stuff. Like, it's you know a lot about it, and you are able to explain things in a way, like you've clearly done this a lot, and B, you know so much about it that this is like secondhand to you, like to talk about it. Like, so like hats off to you for being able to articulate the way, that people can understand in an efficient way. But like, it is, I don't know how you keep all this info in your head, like knowing all this stuff. Like, I'm sure you have all sorts of like protection and stuff like that you do, and things that you know, like I know you have a support system because you mentioned before you have your wife, and her ex is actually outstanding as well. I would love to be able to talk to her, and I know that some of the work she does with like SRA survivors is something that's really interesting to me as well. I would love to capture some of her stories and whatever if she's willing to come on and talk to us too. But like, you absolutely would love to keep having you come back on, like just like little updates and stuff like that, to anything else you're learning, or, as you're becoming more willing to like put more information out there, like would love to be a part of putting that stuff out here for people to see and to help, first like save lives, promote organized safety, and, just get this message out there. So many people that need to hear it. And honestly, there's a lot of shadow work, going on with the UAP thing. You can tell, like, there's so many different people that aren't being honest, or they're hiding different things that they know. And people get called out all the time on X. It's like, just seems like stupid drama, but like, I know it's more than just like dumb drama. It's something like these people are heavily involved in the government. Of course, they're being manipulated and controlled in a lot of different ways, with what they talk about, who they talk to, all these other things. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, I mean, and here's the thing: is like just 100%. If they're in the UAP scene, they need to address behavioral modification. Behavioral modification and the UAP scene are hand in hand. If it's not addressed, you can't rule it out. And you have to assume that's what you're dealing with. If they don't address it, they're compromised. And, if they're at the operational level, 100%. If you have a former ISA guy, TFO, right, and, now he's front-facing public relations, programmed, telling you that gamma story. But guess what? If something happens with him, it'll flip his switch, too. It's fucked up. And, these people come from it. It's 100%. This is the dirty secret. Like you said about my wife, she deals with survivors. She has, like, one of the largest libraries of full-length testimony. Now, not everybody, and I appreciate you saying I can explain this, because tonight I feel a little off, and it's just like, it's hard to talk about this shit. I'm new at talking about this publicly, especially with a mask off and just speaking freely. Like, it's weird, right?
Oh,
and once I get going,
job.
I'll get going, but I appreciate it. But like, yeah, this is what I know. Unfortunately, I was involved with this shit, and this was my specialty. I was being groomed and was a protege to actually, oversee programming, not like I'm not as much the hands-on guy, but like, programming methods and, refining things and dealing with that, at a high level with that. It's fucked up. It is what it is. That's why I'm using this to kind of like try to turn it around. But, she has one of the largest libraries of dealing with survivors. You'll see the overlap between military intelligence, between UAP stuff, between some of these like age-old known families and stuff like this with the SRA. You see a lot of you see, Knights of Columbus, Malta, you see Roger Cruz, you see whatever you see all of this. But the thing is, like, the people might not exactly be your preferred type of person you'd listen to. You might not resonate with their material as much, but like there's enough variety of people speaking out, and you'll see the common themes, and you'll see that where stuff gets corroborated, and it's indisputable that of what level this happens at, and people just this needs to be the conversation. People need to get wise enough to behavioral modification and need to address it, because the technology is so scary now. If you don't, pretty soon it's all going to be happening in the background, and they're just going to be playing with little frequencies, just in this flooded world, because you have frequencies bouncing around you all day, and like that's as fucked up as it is. That's where we're at, to where we're in danger of being covertly controlled and all sorts of stupid shit, just because people can't face reality and fucking demand that this be the conversation, and that's really all that has to happen. If the public gets privy to this and demands that it gets addressed, well, it's going to be a lot harder for the people to actually perpetrate this behind the scenes, and it will be able to be stopped. But that's really the only thing. At the same time, people become privy to it, it will be safer for the people that want to leave the cult, because you still have the cult aspect. It's not just the technological control. You still have a lot of people coming from this old generation. So like if people get educated and make a conducive environment, more people would come forward, less people would be involved. Like that's all that needs to happen. We just have the full length conversation. And I appreciate your time and allowing me to do that. And, I'm just going to keep on doing what I do. And, if you have information about ritual abuse, mind control, behavioral modification, about crimes and corruption from protected parties, you can go to organizedsafety.org. That's an anonymous platform. It's end-to-end encrypted. You can leave the information according. If you would like, you can leave a brand new Proton email address. Don't lose it. We recommend a brand new one. And if you check the box to give permission for notification, if the information you enter is corroborated and it's detected in our system, if the same names are mentioned, if the same location, if the same program names, same guy, whatever, if that's detected in our system, is corroborated, and you allow notification, we will notify you and with the liaison, and you can network with these people, build up blind preponderance of evidence for civil law, build up burden of proof for criminal law, or just help identify the network and build up that knowledge base so we can better address it. because we've been running this for over a decade privately. And I built this inspired upon and expounding upon the work of Valerie Wolf at that 1995 ACHRE. So I've been working with people that have been doing this now for over 30 years. So we have a huge database, and we even have some that we've been showing people behind the scenes. But again, most of these people, it's too much for them. They're scared shitless. The people, when like the people at SSCI and the people at Armed Forces Committee are just finding out that MKUltra is a thing, and like they're freaked out, it's like, what the fuck? Yeah, I mean, it's bad news. You know, unfortunately, a lot of these people that are in power positions, they're there because they can be controlled, not because they're good at what they do. We have a lot of inept people. You know, that people need to stand up for themselves. They need to communicate, and they need to demand justice. You know, it's just get privy to behavior modification, start holding some people accountable. You know, we're not looking for any extreme rash action. We're not trying to dump things that re-traumatize people and, like, you know, show a bunch of sensitive material. We're just trying to have the right conversations to address the right places, to provide people a path out of this safely, and to, you know, expose the corruption that needs to be exposed so it can be, so we can break the cycle. That's what we need to do, is stop this cycle.
Is she still around, Valerie Wolf?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I believe she's still alive.
Mm-hmm. I was actually just going to ask if you knew who she was, or if you knew her and had contact with her.
I'm not in direct contact with Valerie Wolf. No, I've never been in direct contact with her.
Gotcha.
But I'm a fan of her work and all that. But yeah.
The last thing I want to say to you, other than thank you, is that you should really talk to other veterans. Like, I don't know, you probably have like other veteran podcasts and things like that, because Task Force Orange was involved a lot in the global war on terror. Like, they were. And I have and know people who were around them a lot. And so to say, like, you'll find a lot more information, or you'll find people who you would be interesting to talk to for you in the veteran community. And I don't know if you've already figured that out, but like, it's just like, if I could give you like some advice, like that would be a direction I would go.
No, absolutely. I appreciate it. And I am unfortunately familiar with what's going on, and yeah, I do have a few people, but that's what I'm looking to. And you know, you're kind of one of the ones bridging towards that, because this is also like a demographic to where people need to get a little bit more awareness raised for a variety of reasons. And these same people might not listen to like a female survivor's testimony of being trafficked at one of these parties, right? They, you know, might be interested in hearing the different aspect. So yeah, I appreciate it. No, absolutely. No. So that's the alley I'm going. You know, if y'all know something, you know where to go. OrganizeSafety.org. Holler at me.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on, Gray. I appreciate you very
much.
Awesome,
brother.
Yeah. No, thank you. And I look forward to talking to you again, hopefully in the future. So
thank you, sir. Appreciate your time.
You too.
Thank you again, brother.